This story follows a typical transmigration plot, where a game developer is reincarnated as the villain character in the very game he created with his own hands. But before diving into the thick of it, let's get a bit of background on the game and the unfortunate developer whose fate is about to take a twisted turn. It's the middle of the night, and Kim Woo-jin has finally fixed the bug that had been bugging the hell out of him for weeks. He just finished the game route of a side character known as Daon von Grahan Euclin. Daon is one of the intermediate bosses in the game and a named villain. There were countless errors Woo-jin had to fix because he needed to optimize the game so that no matter what route the player chose, Daon's death was inevitable. Just as he's done grinding his ass off to complete the work, his ex walks in. She also happens to be the team leader of the development team. Woo-jin had a good time with her when they were together, but their relationship grew distant as their personalities clashed. While he was a lazy ass who did nothing but procrastinate, she was a workaholic. She was so ambitious that it even helped him become a better person. However, their relationship still ended in a breakup, and he ultimately couldn't change despite her efforts. 6 months later, he heard she had someone new by her side. Anyhow, as she notices him working on Daon, she casually drops a bomb that Daon's character design was based on Woo-jin himself. Even Daon's traits and skills perfectly complemented Woo-jin's personality. She suddenly notices her boyfriend waiting outside, so she leaves. It's almost 2 a.m., and Woo-jin is still testing Daon over and over to make sure everything is perfect. Woo-jin doesn't like the fact that Daon is supposed to resemble him. See, when Daon was a child, he was called a magical genius and put on a pedestal. But in reality, he was more mid-core than anyone could have. His arrogance and noble background shaped him into someone with the worst personality. Daon's character is so twisted that even calling him human would be a compliment. As the story progresses, Daon is supposed to get stronger, and throughout the game, he is surrounded by people who love to hate him. Woo-jin decides to add another personality trait, something special and distinct only to Daon. Given that this villain takes after him, he adds an attribute called comprehension. Not only that, Woo-jin sneaks in a few of his favorite attributes: wealth, Midas touch, sharp eyesight, and iron will. After stuffing him with all these goodies, Woo-jin realizes he might have gone overboard. He quickly decides to revert Daon back to how he was originally supposed to be, because the last thing he wants is another bug popping up right before the release date. But just as he's about to fix it, he gets a text message from someone telling him to look outside. When Woo-jin does, he sees a massive hole in the sky. The last thing he remembers is a lightning strike descending toward him. In the next moment, he wakes up inside the very game world he created. It's already been a few days since he possessed the body of Daon, a man fated to die no matter what. That's when Daon's sister suddenly barges in and berates him for slacking off instead of fulfilling his duties as a distinguished professor. She's annoyed that he's cooped up in his room over a damn woman. After dumping a pile of documents that Daon is supposed to process, she leaves in a grumpy mood, not before warning him to get his act together. She won't stand for him shaming the household's name. At first, Woo-jin thought this was just a twisted dream, but as days passed, the realistic sensation of life forced him to accept the harsh reality. He still doesn't know if this is some kind of afterlife since he did die from that lightning strike. Whatever the case, one thing is certain: he has now literally become the villain of the game he once developed. Daon von Grahan Euclin. If you've forgotten, let me remind you, he's the middle boss in the game. No matter which route you take, he is the root of all problems and the ultimate enemy of everyone. He is responsible for causing pain to countless characters. Another thing Woo-jin is concerned about is that he has no clue which part of the story he's currently in. The only thing he knows is how much mana he possesses. Even so, he has no idea how fast it runs out. He's not joking when he says that everyone, including himself, tested the game around 1,000 times during development, and this character only barely survived once. Daon was created solely to die and serve his purpose as the middle boss. Woo-jin then glances at the documents Daon's sister threw at him before storming out. Her name is Yariel von Grahan Euclin, Daon's half-sister, and the one currently serving as the head of House Euclin in his stead. And it just so happens that Daon doesn't share a typical sibling bond with her. Daon also has a fiancée, and her name is Julie. Given how Yariel mentioned Julie in such a bad tone, Woo-jin suspects something must have happened between him and her. The document in his hand turns out to be a contract. Apparently, he has already signed himself up as Professor Daon at the Impartial University, responsible for teaching basic magic and mana mindset. Looks like he has no choice but to attend the lectures he's supposed to deliver. While he has zero experience teaching, this opportunity also allows him to step outside and gather intel on the current circumstances of this world. A system notification pops up, blinking in front of him. It shows that his primary survival goal is to become necessary to the game. For the side quest, he is supposed to deliver a lecture in university. If he completes the quest, he'll be granted 0.5 store currency. He recalls how there are routes where Deculan dies because of Uriel's actions. To avoid that, he gets up to fulfill his current mission. Not to mention, that store currency will be crucial for his survival. Though he's not quite sure which topic he's supposed to deliver a lecture on, he figures he doesn't have to worry about it. After all, he has the comprehension skill he added before being transmigrated into the game. This attribute helps him understand literally anything. The only thing he needs is a little mana to activate it. As he prepares and changes into something more formal, he notices how drastically different this place is from where he used to live. Yet, at the same time, he moves through everything effortlessly, as if he had lived his entire life as Deculan. Under normal circumstances, he would have felt out of place wearing clothes like these, but now they feel elegant and bring him comfort. And it's all thanks to one of Deculan's attributes: intimidation, dignity, and aesthetic sense. It's as if Deculan is allowing him to completely take over this body. Woojin doesn't even feel the urge to say anything that would be considered rude. The formality that Kim Woojin once found rigid now feels natural. Although his main purpose is to gather information, this walk toward his first lecture feels completely normal, as if he's always belonged here. He can absolutely feel himself fulfilling the role of a noble, one of the superior members of the aristocracy. It's a stark contrast to the life he originally had. Kim Woojin was a nobody from South Korea, with fairly average looks, a lazy, supposedly pathetic guy who was even dumped by a girl. But now, as Deculan, he wants to embody the role of a noble properly. As he proceeds to enter his car, he recalls that he has never been in such a luxurious vehicle before. Speaking of nice cars, he remembers his ex's boyfriend, who also had one just to flex. Suddenly, he notices a young boy sitting in the adjacent seat. When the boy realizes Deculan is there, he frantically greets the professor and proceeds to hand over some documents. Seeing this, Deculan entertains the possibility that this person is perhaps his assistant, or maybe even his secretary. Deculan questions him about his identity, which causes the boy to get a little startled, especially since he has already been serving Deculan for 3 years. Deculan soon realizes that the document he assumed was lecture material is actually just a script for him to read. It contains all the information needed for the lecture, down to every detail. He isn't surprised, though. Given Deculan's nature, there was no way he would have been capable of preparing material himself, considering how prideful and untalented he is. Which means this boy has done all the work. So, Woojin feels more than obliged to use a few words of appreciation. The boy is startled upon receiving a compliment. Even the driver is bewildered to hear his master saying something nice for once. Woojin also feels the recoil of this body after offering praise. It's a literal physical reaction. He actually feels sick after complimenting someone, which only makes Woojin question just how terrible of a person this guy Deculan really is. He felt this same sickening sensation when leaving the manor earlier. It seems that Deculan's consciousness is trying to invade his own. After their short journey, they finally arrive at the Imperial University, a place bustling with life. Now that he's here, his next task is to find the area mentioned in the documents, Roteo Hall. Once we arrive at the designated place, we see that the students have already taken their seats, and surprisingly, they seem eager to attend Professor Deculan's lecture. Rumor has it that Deculan is a master of spell interpretation, a talent that once earned him the title of child prodigy at a young age. Once our guy finally graces the class with his presence, he calls for their attention, introducing himself as Deculan von Grahan Uklein. He is here to lead this class as the head professor of the university's magic tower. With the formalities out of the way, he begins the lecture. The female students are absolutely smitten by how handsome and imposing Deculan is. But one particular female student does not share the same sentiment. As far as she is concerned, Deculan is an enemy of her father, nothing more than a piece of trash in her eyes. To understand why she harbors such resentment, we need to look into the past. Almost 3 years ago, her father took his own life. For many years, he dedicated himself to researching spell interpretation. But when someone extorted his thesis from him, he fell into complete despair and ultimately chose death. The person who robbed her father of his life's work was the one everyone called a genius spell interpreter. And that despicable person was Deculan. With the loss of her father, she was powerless to do anything. In the end, she lost everything, including her family's house and territory, becoming an orphan with nowhere to call home. So she made a vow, a promise to take revenge on that bastard. To fulfill that pledge, she fought her way into the Empire's Royal University, where Deculan is a professor. While other students may not know the truth, she is determined to expose the fact that Deculan's so-called spell interpretation skills are nothing more than a stolen bluff, achievements that rightfully belong to her father. She can't stand seeing him occupy a place that was supposed to be her father's. But as much as she wants to expose him right away, she knows she needs to stay calm, because the only way to take him down is to orchestrate her revenge meticulously. Dekulin once again commands the room's attention, introducing himself as the head professor of the Magic Tower and a monarch mage who controls the elements. With that, he begins his lecture. He starts by explaining the fundamentals of magic, its 3 major attributes and 9 types. Attributes are the origin and source of magic, while elements are the materials that make up objects. The 9 types include summoning, spirits, destruction, support, enchantment, manipulation, ductility, bewitchment, and lastly, harmony. As Woojin continues delivering the lecture, he realizes that this job is actually much easier than he initially thought. It's his first time teaching, and he is unfamiliar with the theory of magic. Yet even though he is simply reading from a script, he understands everything perfectly. Not only that, but Dekulin's natural presence and overwhelming grace make the students hang on to his every word. Even the burdensome traits of elitism, like maintaining interest and eye contact, feel natural rather than oppressive. Perhaps the current Dekulin truly possesses the qualities of a great teacher. We then return to the lecture's content, where we learn how the use of mana differs depending on where it is stored in the body. Normally, mages store mana in their heads, as it is the easiest place to imagine spells. Knights store mana in their hearts, allowing them to emit it through their blood vessels. Lastly, there is the inner core, which combines internal and external mana, making it the most universally effective storage method. In simple terms, hard work is important, but if one lacks talent, they need to choose a path and focus. Speaking of focusing, Woojin reflects on how Dekulin's talents aren't that impressive either. His current mana is around 3,500. If you need a comparison to understand how small this mana pool is, consider this. There's a mage whose primary mana is at 30,000. So Woojin finds it quite ironic that he's lecturing students about something he should be implementing in his own life. In any case, he concludes the lecture, but there's still one particular line he's hesitating to deliver. He's sure that if it were the original Dekulin, he wouldn't have read this sentence. And that line is, if there are any students who want to ask questions. It seems like the students were thoroughly absorbed in the lecture, so there aren't any lingering doubts they have regarding the lecture topic. Even Dekulin feels relieved that there are no questions. But just as he thinks this, that same student who has a grudge against Dekulin stands up. She recalls an event from last night, where a mysterious spell was discovered in the dormitories. It's assumed to be the work of the devil, but she wants to hear Dekulin's thoughts on the matter. Before answering her query, Dekulin can't help but call her out for her lack of ethics. She was supposed to mention her name and affiliation before asking any questions. He's not willing to respond to someone who doesn't even know basic classroom etiquette. With that said, he begins to leave. Not because he cares about etiquette, but because he's not in the condition to respond to her question. After all, his comprehension skills consume a huge amount of mana, and he currently has only 2,000 left in reserve out of the 3,375 he originally had. Just understanding the script cost him 1,300 mana, so he's unsure how much mana it'll take to learn about a spell he's never seen before. Meanwhile, the students are snickering under their breath after seeing how she made a fool of herself. They think she was trying to get the professor's attention, but it backfired. The poor girl is stung by the humiliation caused by the professor's words, but she still tries to persist, hoping to get a response from him. According to her, the Magic Tower is refusing to analyze the situation, believing it's just a rumor. But if it's Professor Dekulin, she's sure they might be able to figure out what kind of magic was used. She casts a spell herself and requests Dekulin to interpret it. With no choice, Dekulin examines the spell, which instantly costs him around 1,700 mana. She reveals that several remaining debutantes at the dormitory are analyzing it, but they found absolutely no leads. So she's hoping that Professor Dekulin can at least take a glance at it. Without hesitation, Dekulin declares that it's barrier magic, and his sudden response catches her off guard. He continues to elaborate that it's a bewitchment-type barrier spell, which means the caster of this spell intended to trap everyone in the dormitory. Now that he's answered her query, he dismisses her, telling her not to persist further. Since the side quest has been cleared, Dekulin collects the reward currency he was promised. The scene then cuts to the university's Magic Tower cafeteria, where we meet that girl again, eating without much regard for table manners. By the way, her name is Ephorine. The only reason she had asked that question was to expose that Dekulin's spell interpretation skills are a lie. But instead, she became the clown, and the embarrassment she endured was crushing. She's still convinced that Dekulin didn't know what he was talking about and just said whatever came to his mind. You see, bewitchment magic is extremely difficult, and most spells require parameters. So, Dekulin calling the spell bewitchment magic without mentioning any parameters seems like a stretch. What she showed him was a direct copy of the unknown magic circle that was drawn on the front door of the dormitory last night. While everyone was initially astounded by the unknown spell, it quickly became research material for the new students. So she knew from the start that Dekulin was full of it, making up the claim that the spell was bewitchment magic. But then, one of her friends rushes to her to report that the magic circle on the dorm's front door yesterday is indeed a barrier spell. And they figured it out after collective research. Basically, what Professor Deculane said about that spell was, in fact, true. Ephraim is in absolute disbelief. She refuses to accept that it was actually barrier magic. After all, she doesn't want to acknowledge Deculane as a legitimate master of spell interpretation. Her friend, after rattling off endless praises for Professor Deculane and his capabilities, eventually decides to leave. Before going, she thanks Ephraim for asking the professor about the spell since no one else had the guts to question him. Even so, Ephraim remains unconvinced that Deculane gave the correct answer on purpose. She believes it was just a fluke. What frustrates her even more is that she ended up making him stand out even more. Now everyone is convinced Deculane is a capable professor. She then begins reading through a document detailing the accomplishments of their prestigious Professor Deculane. She's digging deep, trying to learn more about Deculane. After all, there's a famous saying, if you know the enemy and yourself, you will never be defeated. She decides to steel herself. If she has to face that jackass daily, she'll make sure to expose him hard enough to ruin his reputation completely. The scene shifts to Deculane, who is still dreading the worst possible outcome that could have occurred in the classroom. You see, the moment he looked at that spell, his comprehension skill activated automatically. Just looking at the spell circle, with its tangled lines and intricate structure, was enough to drain every bit of mana he had left. And most importantly, even after sacrificing all that mana, he was unable to understand what the spell actually was. Even if he had twice the mana he has now, he wouldn't have been able to grasp the principles behind it. But for now, he's just relieved that everything worked out in his favor. Just as he continues walking, his path is suddenly blocked by a woman clad in white knight armor. With white hair and light-colored eyes, she's a familiar sight. Deculane immediately recognizes her because he's seen her countless times while working on this game. She is Julie von Dea Freyden, his supposed fiancée, and a named character who will eventually become the pinnacle of knighthood, though he wasn't expecting to cross paths with her this early. Regardless, he responds to her greeting promptly, claiming that he's doing fine. But Julie doesn't seem convinced. She questions how he can be doing fine after breaking the promise they made a week ago. Of course, Woojin has no clue what promise she's talking about. Since he wants to avoid unnecessary drama this early on, he decides to brush it off. He tries to walk past her, casually claiming that he doesn't recall making any promise. But Julie quickly blocks his path again. She won't let him run away like last time. Seeing how serious she is about this promise thing, Deculane realizes she won't let him go without an answer. So he reiterates the same thing, claiming to have forgotten and using his recent fever as an excuse. He requests that she remind him exactly which promise she's talking about. At this point, the story flashes back to 1 week ago. Julie had made a promise to him. If he was truthful to himself and confessed his pretenses and arrogance to everyone, she would always be by his side, even if the world crumbled. Back in the present, poor Julie is on the brink of tears. She wonders if she placed her trust in the wrong person. With a sulking expression, she steps aside, giving him permission to leave. Deculane doesn't even bother to ask what's bothering her and simply walks away, something that, of course, annoys the hell out of Julie, though she doesn't voice it. Their engagement was purely out of convenience. With the union of Deculane, a talented mage, and Julie, a talented knight, the heads of their families believed that it would greatly benefit both sides, expanding their influence. The Uclines and the Freydens, two powerful noble bloodlines, would dominate together. For this reason alone, there was no one to object the marriage, and this is why Julie has been roped to marry him, even though she does not love him a single bit. However, the two households later realized that Deculane's talents never truly existed in the first place. He was not the talented mage everyone thought he was. Perhaps Deculane did not wish to acknowledge it, but he had lied to the world by calling himself a genius at analyzing spells, ultimately becoming a professor. There had even been headlines highlighting how the youngest top professor at the Magic Tower is currently on the decline. After that headline ran, he stopped showcasing any accomplishments. But despite this, the Uclines and the Freydens tried to keep it quiet, and Julie was sure it was because neither household wanted to become the topic of gossip. They didn't want their flaws exposed to the public, but Julie couldn't forgive the situation either. She had accepted the marriage without love, but she could not stand the lies, which conflicted with her beliefs as a knight. To her surprise, Deculane had agreed to honor her beliefs by remaining a truthful person. But now, it seemed to her that it was just another load of bullcrap after all. Before we continue, let's take a moment to provide some background on the Imperial University and the Magic Tower. The Imperial University is the best university in this game, and its magic department is the top department of all. One could compare the magic department to the equivalent of Korean University Medical School, and the Magic Tower to the Korean National University Hospital. Woojin takes note of the grandeur of this place. It has a large campus, with a garden that's carefully maintained, resembling an American college campus. His team members, and he had spent many nights working together to create this atmosphere. While he would love to experience this beautiful place, his only regret is that he wishes he were in someone else's body, not the one he currently occupies. Suddenly, Woojin notices someone following him. As he turns, he crashes into the person who was closely trailing him. It turns out to be his assistant, who is carrying a lot of documents. The papers scatter all over the ground after the crash. Decalane didn't immediately recognize it was Alan. He had instinctively thought that someone might have been trying to ambush him. After getting back to his office, Alan finally presents the documents he was rushing to deliver. It's a list of sponsorships for the new mages this year. The Magic Tower is similar to research facilities in the real world, so funding is required for the development of magic. Professors at the Magic Tower sponsor the new mages they deem worthy. As Decalane goes through the profiles of each candidate, one particular name stands out. The name is highlighted in gold, which he assumes is due to his attribute. This attribute is known as Wealthy Magnate. It allows him to attract wealth and become an exceptional financier with an uncanny intuition for profitable ventures. The more information provided, the more accurate his intuition becomes. Then there's another attribute known as Sharp Eyesight. This ability allows one to visually perceive institutions, attributes, mana points, and similar elements. It is primarily used in conjunction with other traits rather than on its own. The reason Decalane is able to identify this promising candidate is due to the combination of his two attributes, Wealthy Magnate and Sharp Eyesight. It's now evident that individuals with names shining in this glittering gold light are sure to bring him wealth. There are a few others like this, but one name stands out the most. That name belongs to none other than Ephraim Luna, the very girl who is actively seeking his downfall. To think that Deculane's abilities have led him to see her as the most potential candidate for prosperity, even though she is determined to destroy his career. Decalane recognizes her as one of the main characters in the game. According to the developers, the only information he knows about her is that she lost her father due to Deculane's actions. He also takes note that Ephraim seems to have no sponsors for some reason. When he questions Alan about it, his assistant reveals that everyone is cautious when it comes to her. Well, it's no surprise. After all, no one wants to anger Decalane by sponsoring someone who might become his enemy. One thing is commendable about Ephraim, however. Despite not attending the academy and learning magic through self-study, her talent speaks volumes. The potential in her is limitless. Yet, Ephraim Luna is his enemy, or rather, he is her enemy, since he is the one responsible for her father's death. If things proceed as they did in the original game, Decalane knows he might very well end up dead. After all, he is destined to die in the game. He also has the attribute Villain's Fate, which ensures that the entire world hates him and wants him dead. However, anything or anyone that fails to kill him ultimately makes him stronger. In the game, Decalane dies in countless ways, such as by sword, by poison, by assassination. The method may change, but the outcome is always the same: death. The only way for him to survive is to make different choices that the original Decalane would not have made. With that in mind, he ultimately decides to sponsor Ephraim. After signing the documents, he tells Alan to submit them. He also instructs him to borrow a few books that he is about to mention. Later, as he sits alone, Decalane reflects on how much money he requires to survive. From what he knows, many of the deaths awaiting him can be avoided with money alone. Investing in a promising mage is one way to acquire wealth. However, that alone isn't enough. There are countless characters in this game world who resent him, and they will try to kill him whenever they get the chance. In order to survive, amassing wealth and power is the only way out. While Woojin desires to become stronger, he remembers that Deculane's talents are average at best. If he doesn't find a way to improve, he's certain he won't survive the numerous threats closing in on him. Luckily, there is one thing in his favor: his attributes. Decalane can't control all four elements as he boasts, but he definitely has potential in manipulating earth and fire. Combining earth, fire, and metal results in the formation of Deculane's unique attribute, Midas Touch. This attribute consumes the user's mana to unlock the potential of a target. Deculane's talents in manipulating metal also allow him to wield ki-controlled, levitating blades. While it sounds grandiose, these chi-controlled blades are essentially just telekinesis at its core. However, in this world, telekinesis is not widely known or understood. If Decalane learns basic manipulation magic, he can compensate for his lack of raw power by manipulating metal objects. To make this a reality, he needs to first learn the fundamentals of manipulation magic. So, he decides to test his skills. As soon as he activates his comprehension skill, he begins absorbing all the concepts and spells related to basic telekinesis written in this book. Once he has absorbed the knowledge, he uses his newly acquired telekinesis powers on a pen. And just like that, the pen floats into the air. Thanks to his memorize attribute, Decalane can cast the telekinesis spell without needing any incantation. Although the current telekinesis spell he's learned only covers the basics, it's already quite powerful. He can't even begin to imagine the possibilities once he learns more advanced telekinesis. The next thing Decalene wants to figure out is what to do with a magic circle. He considers engraving it over his entire body. In this world, magic circles become stronger the larger they are, so he plans to understand his body first using his comprehend attribute. Not just his brain but his heart and inner core as well. Then he will engrave magic circles all over his body to strengthen his telekinesis. Of course, there is a risk that his body might overload or suffer side effects. But this is where one of his attributes, Iron Man, comes in handy. This attribute grants Deculin innate physical abilities, and the potential of his body is of the highest caliber. He's confident that this attribute will allow him to withstand any side effects. As soon as he starts the process of engraving the magic circle onto his body, excruciating pain triggers throughout his body. A pain unlike anything he's ever felt. It feels as though every bone is breaking, and every muscle is being torn apart. However, as grueling as this experience is, Deculin won't waver. Not a single groan escapes his lips. After all, this is the elegance required of a noble. Finally, the process comes to a halt. Sadly, after enduring all this, Deculin has failed due to an insufficient amount of mana, currently standing at just 1 point. But the effort isn't entirely in vain. He now has a magic circle etched onto his shoulder. At this rate, it will take about 2 weeks to cover his entire body. A month passes after Deculin's seminar, and it's finally the first day of lectures at the University Magic Tower. All the students gather in the remote area, awaiting their first lesson. A notice board nearby contains a message from the professor. The professor wishes to test everyone's abilities, so the students will have to prove themselves by performing on their own, in a place already rich with elements. The students are all quite astounded that their teacher just left them to study on their own. The one who is most annoyed by this is, of course, Ephorine. While she curses him under her breath, a girl walks past her and intentionally bumps into her. Naturally, Ephorine, already irritated, turns to confront the girl who just bumped into her. But when she recognizes the person in front of her, her expression quickly contorts into shock. It's none other than Sylvia von Josephine Elaide. The two girls lock eyes for a brief moment, but Sylvia just proceeds to walk away, ignoring Ephorine as though she doesn't even know her. Later, as Ephorine is focused on performing a task, her mind is still preoccupied with the encounter. She is certain the girl she encountered is from House Illeade. About 10 years ago, the Illades, fearing Ephorine's potential, surrounded their manor with troops and threatened them. So it's beyond Ephorine's understanding that Sylvia doesn't recognize her. Suddenly, the structure she is creating with her magic starts to falter, and Ephorine feels a heavy pressure in the air. It's as if her mana is being sucked somewhere. When she looks in the direction of the disturbance, she spots Sylvia, who has just created an enormous structure which is 1,000 times larger than the one Ephorine was making. Naturally, Ephorine is furious, as the turbulence caused by Sylvia's magic has completely disrupted her work. But Sylvia pays no attention to the noise around her, continuing her task undisturbed. This only infuriates Ephorine further. The fact that Sylvia doesn't even acknowledge her existence is maddening. In an effort to get Sylvia's attention, Ephorine decides to provoke her. She begins throwing jabs at Sylvia, undermining her strength. After all, they were rivals, and Sylvia always used to threaten Ephorine and forced her to step away from magic, all to surpass her rival. But once again, Sylvia refuses to acknowledge Ephorine's presence. She claims she doesn't recognize Ephorine, but mentions having heard about the death of the impudent, negligent noble. Of course, Ephorine is enraged to hear this disrespectful trash talk about her father. Without a second thought, she leaps into the air, her magic activated around her balled-up fist. She's determined to make Sylvia regret what she just said. The enraged Ephorine lunges forth with a powerful strike, attempting to punish Sylvia for her disgusting words about her father. In response, the blonde conjures a protective barrier, her eyes flickering in doubt of her own ability. The collision results in an explosive boom, sending rumbles of winds across the bodies of the students, who groan before the impact. The aftermath of the explosion leads to the students checking on each other's health. When the dust settles, Ephorine is made visible, her left hand grabbing hold of Sylvia's head, roaring at the blonde for ever daring to insult her deceased father. As she continues to threaten Sylvia, Ephorine's eyes dart behind, realizing that some kind of mystical dark light has been created in the distance. The students panic and scream, while Ephorine questions if what she's seeing is a void. It's the same spot where both of their mana collided earlier, causing a rupture in space that is now engulfing everything around it. Realizing that the void is at risk of causing an explosion, the students panic even more and attempt to run away. Even Ephorine understands the risk of the situation at hand. The explosion could send metal fragments bursting everywhere like shrapnel, inevitably spelling everyone's doom. The space-devouring ball of black continues to eat away at its surroundings. Ephorine does her best to contain the magic with her might. All of a sudden, she no longer hears its sound or feels its weight, as if the void stopped on its own. When she opens her eyes, a towering man clad in aesthetic noble attire is standing before them. It's their professor, and he has just saved their lives. Deculane's sudden appearance is shocking, but what's even more shocking is the fact that he stopped the fragments using ice magic in an instant. Following that, Deculane left his students' mouths open as he displayed telekinesis magic to control the ice fragments. The sight itself left his students with an impression of the beauty and wonders of magic. Ephorine understands the use of enchantment magic in this case. However, even she could feel enraptured by the mesmerizing use of it before their eyes. With the shards taken care of, the professor spoke, his words denoting the end of the lecture. Turning a strong glare to Sylvia and Ephorine, Deculane tells everyone to leave aside from the troublemakers responsible for creating the situation. Right now, Ephorine's face tells you all you need to know. It's the definition of an "oh shit, I'm so fucked" moment. In the next scene, we jump all the way to the interrogation room. There, Deculane awaited the arrival of the other professors, namely Retlin and Relin, who are the professors of the Spirit Studies and Support Studies departments. Welcoming them is a woman sitting next to Deculane, the chairwoman of the university, Adeline Sigelian. With all the professors seated, they now turn to curiously question the daring student who attempted to strike down a lady of the ill-aid house. Turns out, Ephorine is classified as a nobody, to the point they discriminate against her worth based on her nameless background. Of course, the situation was prevented thanks to Deculane's intervention, impressing all the other professors. Giving it some thought, Deculane understands the outcome that will result from this disciplinary meeting. It's obvious that the daughter of one of the most influential families will be seen as the victim, while the fallen noble Ephorine, a mere commoner before the university's eyes, will be seen as the evil perpetrator. Hence, Deculane feels the urge to involve himself and bring about a shift to that perspective. After all, ever since he set his eyes on Ephorine, he could sense douses of scarlet energy just leaking out of her body. It's as clear as day to a villain character like him, an attribute called the villain's fate. Basically, when the entire world wants you to die, there's trouble brewing, and if he can't influence the outcome soon, his inevitable death will creep closer and closer. The official meeting to conclude Ephorine and Sylvia's fate is sprung into action. Relin is the first one to roar at the Ephorine for senselessly engaging in conflict and jeopardizing the safety of many students. It was only thanks to Deculane's personal involvement that nothing grave happened. In response, dejected as she is, Ephorine states that she cannot mention her reason for the attack. This kind of avoidant response comes across as an offense to the teachers, but right now, all Ephorine can think about is concealing her intentions, so her target, the scumbag Professor Deculane, doesn't know that she's after him. Sylvia's provocative words race through her mind, but even if that is the truth, she can't risk saying anything in front of her one and only target. That is why Ephorine is willingly sitting through discomfort and pain for the sake of her long-term plan. Relin roars at the girl once more, questioning if she's got some sort of an inferiority complex. He drills it into her head, reminding her of their difference in status as a noble and a commoner. Next, Sylvia is told to speak. She also tries to conceal the matter, and excuses that she was responsible for accidentally destroying Ephorine's work, which led to an argument. This puts her as an innocent person in front of the eyes of the disciplinary committee, making it even more irrational for Ephorine to have made her move. The professors continue to grill Ephorine, questioning if she's got anger management issues. Relin even goes as far as to recommend expelling the student entirely, refusing to slide this incident with a warning. Right now, feeling alienated from the professors and receiving not a single word in her support, Ephorine feels isolated and cold. All fingers point to her as the culprit. The professors see her as the person responsible. Every insult and every scolding hurled at her, and the worst part is, she can't issue a single response in return. With her father gone, the poor girl is off on her own. The world has shut itself down on her. Blaming Professor Deculane, she pins him as an object of blame for her own mistakes, which is an emotional response befitting a child. Adeline finally speaks, concluding that each professor thinks the same as the next. Before motioning a decision, she wants to hear Deculane's account of the situation. Making his voice clear, he makes a request to the chairwoman. It's right about this moment where Ephorine thinks her life is over now. It's obvious that she's going to be expelled. But to a shocking turn of events, Deculane puts Sylvia under fire, arguing that she too had a fault in the incident that occurred. His response stuns both students, while Deculane continues to hammer his question once more. Ephorine is at a loss for words, unable to have predicted this trajectory in the meeting. Even Relin, the old fart who chose to see Ephorine as a worthless commoner, is having a field day comprehending Deculane's words. Our boy argues that Sylvia had every reason to act and prevent the incident that was caused, yet she chose not to. He wonders if her so-called esteemed abilities as one of the ill-aid household fell short in the heat of the moment. Sylvia's in a daze. She lowers her head in shame, apologizing first. Then she confesses the truth. Sylvia refused to block Ephorine's attack because she intended for the student to get into trouble. The silver-haired girl is tripping out. There's no way Deculine, someone who is her enemy, took her side just now. It's her fault too, so it's not like he has to protect her. Relin speaks up, countering that as a victim, Sylvia's fault matters very little with how she defended. Blame falls entirely on the assailant. Deculine fires back, stating that as a professor, he's the one who failed for creating a lecture that didn't require his presence. He wonders if he should be taking the blame instead. This sudden comment flusters Professor Relin, who's still on Sylvia's side. Ephorine is out here shocked that this man is steamrolling another professor just to save her ass. It's the height of ridiculousness that he's doing this much to protect her. Having heard enough, the chairwoman concludes her decision. She doesn't think of it as a serious matter, believing that students naturally run into conflict with age. That's why she's more than willing to let this one slide past without any issues. Adeline tells both students to return home as there won't be any consequences this time. Ephorine is having mixed feelings. She was fully prepared to eat an expulsion in her face, and knowing Professor Deculane's personality, things should have concluded that way. So it doesn't make any sense how things concluded the way they did. After the meeting, Relin applauds Deculane's unique insight and analysis on viewing a situation. But our boy's attention turns to Ephorine, who calls for his attention and musters the resolve to ask him a question. She internalizes that if he's familiar with the name Luna, and recalls his association with her father, the one who he put through living hell, causing the man to take his own life to end the pain. Being a master of anticipation, Deculane expected her to reach out to him. This girl is hell-bent on getting an answer from him, and wonders how Deculane would respond to her question, and if he would try and overthrow the verdict of the meeting just to protect himself. Even worse, Ephorine feels afraid that this man may not even remember mistreating her father, which would make her situation even worse. Surprisingly, Deculane tells her that she shouldn't busy herself with the troubles of the past, hindering her potential to grow. Saying those words, he departs, leaving Ephorine with one conclusion. She's reached the understanding that he must know about her father, because if he didn't, he wouldn't have helped her just now. She wonders if the professor personally feels some kind of responsibility, which is why he helped her out of her own difficult situation. Ephorine misunderstands his help as a kind of pity. It fills her heart with joy. At least the scumbag professor didn't forget what he did. So long as that is the case, she's okay with the situation. The conclusion of Ephorine's case results in an addition of 2 points for Deculane's death prevention. In the next scene, we see Sylvia explaining the situation to her father, Giltheon, the head of the Illide family, and an Esper mage. His father affirms that the talented student Ephorine Luna's already missed her chance to flourish as a mage. A decade ago, back when the aptitude exam was being held, both girls encountered the other for the very first time. It was during that time that the manometer went crazy before their presence, predicting their immeasurable talent to become future archmages. These two girls just stared at each other blankly, unable to comprehend the slew of words they had just heard. To give you an example of just how powerful archmages truly are, they are classified as beings that not even emperors can threaten. Only a select few people ever rise to this level, and their names are etched in history forever. Tradition has it that 3 people will become archmages in each era, irrespective of their specialty, a rule that has never changed. Interestingly, currently apart from Demerkin, there are 2 empty spots for the archmages of this era. Adeline is actually a candidate for being an archmage, leaving behind one last seat. It was back then that both the Illid and Luna families stood opposite to each other, and now they must compete for the final seat. Of course, Sylvia's father is adamant on his daughter getting that title no matter the cost, so much so that he threatened Ephorine's father by force, exempting him from enrolling her daughter at the academy. Sylvia understood all too well that the only reason her family recklessly overpowered the Luna family was because they wanted her to seize the throne. They wanted to make her archmage no matter the cost, though it is also her personal wish and predicted fate. That's why Ephorine's words from back then stung her so much. She chalks it off as simply being unlucky. While Giltheon isn't exactly worried about her competitor, he's more worried about Professor Deculane, believing that he's an ordinary man who was a genius at a young age. That's why there's no telling if he could suddenly rise above the ranks and become a dark horse. This isn't new news to Sylvia, though, because she could sense his potential from the moment he deciphered her trap. When the explosion happened, it was true that Sylvia eradicated Ephorine's mana, but she also set up a personal trap to launch the void as a conflict between their attacks. This way, the incident would cause even further demise and put Ephorine under fire. The reason Deculane shot them a glare back then was because he understood this trap from the get-go, despite her being careful of any observation close by. Even though he knew everything, Deculane kept both of them safe by offering a third way, a compromise. It was his warning, a way of demanding them to play along with his version of the story so that they could survive in one piece. Yes, before you even ask, the One Piece is real. In any case, she grossly underestimated his talents, but now it makes her ponder the kind of man he truly is. A few days flew by. We get to see Deculane's glorious manor. This man is living Bruce Wayne's life over here. Getting all dripped out, this man is escorted by his driver, his thoughts agreeing with his decision to support Ephraim in that critical moment. This way, he removed one of the death roots for himself, and even increased store currency. Personally, he wasn't expecting Ephraim to make herself known so quickly in their first encounter, but he could tell from then on that she was hostile from the start. While his intervention just now has made him an enemy of Sylvia as well, it's still the best course of action he could have taken. Brushing that matter off, Deculane isn't keen on attending social events. At the same time, he doesn't want the opportunity of gaining store points to just fly past him. After all, he gained a side quest to attend the Flower of the New Year event, adding another half a point to his store currency. As of right now, he still requires a minimum of 5 currency points to access the shop. That's why he's focusing on interacting with the main characters for now. Arriving at his destination, Deculane is welcomed with honor and respect. The party is full of nobles and their expensive laughter. The professor spots a bunch of named characters that he can interact with. Of them, one stands more notable than ever. It's Helm, a character who Kim Woo-jin personally modeled in the game. Arriving at the event was good after all, Deculane believes. He's spotted by an old man out of the blue, who is honored to meet the esteemed Professor Deculane. His sudden announcement of the professor's name draws attention from many eyes, all darting away to see the professor. The party goes into an uproar, celebrating the professor's great presence. That cool and peaceful confidence he had about the party from earlier, it's all shattered to pieces now. While this is happening, Deculane hears someone remarking on Sir Ganesha. The professor draws away from the current interaction and follows the trail of the voice. Having heard about Ganesha, he knows that he can't risk not having an interaction with one of the most important characters around. His gaze shifts and carefully picks apart the crowd, but Ganesha is nowhere to be found. Deculane seriously doesn't want to lose this chance, but unbeknownst to him, the scary adventurer is standing behind him. At this point in the story, she's the 5th strongest character introduced. Deculane finally locates her on the higher floor, the scarlet-haired woman staring down at the scene. He quickened his pace to meet her, but gets cockblocked by Helm, who interacts with him at the worst possible moment. Let's explore Helm a bit more. He's an exclusive mage of the royal palace, ranked as a monarch, equaling to Deculane's title. Helm provokes Deculane, surprised that the great professor still remembers his name. He wants to check in on Deculane's research and immediately brings up the mention of some bad rumors. Helm points out how his research has stagnated in the past 3 years, and many are now questioning Deculane's true abilities and talents. This audacious man is straight up talking shit in his face. It just so happens that Helm was Deculane's peer in their university. They once had a close relationship, but after Deculane seized the position of head professor for himself, Helm's jealousy grew harsher and hostile over time. Though the original character would have been peeved by Helm's provocative remarks, our boy is as cool as a cucumber, refusing to respond with impulse. Also, the rumors only mention the truth, so he's fine with them too. Deculane's attention is drawn to shock when he notices that his target, Ganesha, is no longer there. Poor guy wanted to achieve one goal for the day, and it was ruined by this blabbering loudmouth who still continues to yap endlessly. Walking right past him, Deculane annoyingly swears at him and even calls him a piece of rotten cheese. I loved that insult so much I'm going to be using that as his nickname from now on. Rotten Cheese is left bewildered by the statement. The chill professor refuses to say another word and quickly moves on to locate Ganesha, fearing that she may leave the society even before he can acquaint himself with her. His plan is in shambles as we speak. His sudden disappearance from the event causes a bunch of people to wonder where he went. Deculane really wanted to end the Rotten Cheese then and there, but he was limited to his response because of the people around them. To his shock, Ganesha calls his name. She's there standing right next to him. She's curious if he came looking for her. It's true that Deculane found her unexpectedly, having escaped the clutches of the imbeciles in the gathering event. Still, her reaction makes him wonder if these two have previously met each other in the past. The Scarlet Adventurer lets out a chuckle at his response, when he confesses he merely got lost. Ganesha calls out his little lie and knows he was looking. She apologizes for messing up their earlier mission and even requests letting the matter go. Now it's confirmed that they had a previous relationship based on commissions. The adventurer apologizes once more for failing to recruit a talented child under his wing. It's because of her personal attachment that she ruined the mission, refusing to hand the child over to him. Now, of course, our boy is curious about the context of this discussion, and he's gained an understanding of Deculane's decisions. He was going to use a talented child to do the research in his place and maintain his name. Curiously, Ganesha asks a question. She sensitively asks how long he's going to keep up the facade and remain the way he is. Her careful choice of words puts him into contemplation. It's true that before possessing Deculane's body, he maintained character and acted violently, gaining many enemies and losing trust with the people in his life, even going as far as hurting others for his personal fame. But now, the current Deculane has come to a decision, confessing that he's going to live a different life. Intrigued, Ganesha is surprised. She was fully expecting him to lash out and attack her for that statement. Of course, since she was brash and acted on her own during the mission, Kim Woo-jin, who is possessing Deculane's body, is rather surprised that this bold professor would go as far as to attempt attacking one of the strongest people around at the time. It goes to show the villain's reckless demeanor. While he doesn't know much about the original Deculane's past relationship with Ganesha, he knows for a fact that this woman could easily annihilate him with no effort at all. Two of her most prominent attributes are invincible body and master of martial arts. You can only expect her to go batshit crazy after having those stats. She's one of the few adventurers who has reached the height of her physical stats. Now, because Kim Woo-jin is possessing Deculane's body, there was no instance of hiring assassins to do the deed for him. Because if that were the case, Ganesha would have died already. While he's having this contemplation, Ganesha is wondering if this guy hit his head or ate something spoiled today. She can't place a finger on his strange behavior. Deculane's already achieved his goals for today, so he quickens to leave the discussion. Ganesha is rather surprised, and wonders if it's really true that he won't be sending anyone after her. Turning to her one last time, the cool professor remarks that it would be beneath him. This girl is literally left too stunned to even speak. Going back to the hall, Deculane internalizes that he could easily utilize Eucline's power to pressurize the adventurer using the guild. However, doing so would only cause his death variables to increase. To his utmost horror, the system informs him that he just prevented a death variable. Bro was not expecting to get murdered tonight. This means for a fact that Ganesha's conversation from earlier could have ended very, very differently. Even a simple social gathering event is waving death flags over his head, poor guy. The scene switches to Rayleigh, an adventurer who is relative to Julie. The talented knight is sitting in annoyance, clearly disoriented and in a bad mood. Rayleigh realizes what must be causing her sour expression, so she boldly asks if Julie has made any progress with her fiancé as of late. Just hearing that, Julie's body fidgets. Rayleigh clarifies that she means Professor Deculane, as there were rumors spreading about. Recalling his annoying response from their meeting, Julie doesn't hide her frustration, expressing that their relationship is in the gutter. Only this time she confessed it out loud. In a surprising turn of events, the man of the hour comes around to leave. He spots her, but he's already leaving, despite being known for loving gathering events. He didn't even shoot a look towards his fiancée, causing people to wonder if he's got a sour relationship with Julie. This adds to the rumors about him. Deculane's early leave from the gathering event raised a number of questions, all leading to one theory. They think it's because Julie and him had a fallout, but of course not even the game developer Kim Woo-jin could have predicted this turn of events. A week has passed since he attended the social gathering event. This man has been putting in the work, looking at his damn muscles as he finesses that pull-up. Apart from his usual memorization and telekinetic training, he introduced working out to his routine to increase his stamina. It's mostly because he nearly died from experimenting with some crazy shit. Just a few days ago, this guy was on the floor, coughing out blood in his miserable condition. Any normal mage would have died from what he did. The only reason he survived is thanks to his Iron Man attribute. Bro is Tony Stark. In a quest to achieve greater strength after encountering Ganesha, he attempted to engrave fire control alongside his telekinetic powers. This would aid his metal manipulation overall. He wanted to upgrade his core magic for his telekinetic ability, cutting off the time needed to learn additional magic. However, this method was extremely reckless even for him, and it was only after experiencing the incredible strain on his body that he felt the need to dedicate some time to training. That's how he came to develop a workout routine. By the end of his routine, this guy is looking like David Lade with his aesthetics. With his morning workout wrapped up, it's time to go to class. The scene jumps ahead to Professor Deculane's office, where we see Alan delivering the professor a message from the magic tower. The sender is classified as someone from a high rank. Prying open the message, Deculane learns that there's an audit hearing in 6 months regarding his research. They just want him to prepare some documents for the hearing by that time. Of course, this is troublesome, because this means Deculane's research is put under fire and under question for being delayed. The thing about Deculane's role is that he's always been classified as the head professor in the eyes of the game. It's critical for him to maintain his title as a professor, because the moment he loses it is also the moment his hopes of returning home will be dashed for good. Right now, he's going to scavenge and find anything worth his time from his laboratory. Declan enters the room, which is a complete and utter mess, as if there was an attack of some kind. The place has been uncared for, and if Declan frequented the laboratory often, there's no way he would have kept it in this horrendous state. Interestingly, one disgusting spot looks particularly out of place. It begs the question if he was trying to hide something. There's no telling, but Declan thinks it's a good way to test the waters and see what's up. Thanks to his telekinetic magic, he didn't have to dirty his own hands plodding through the trash. From the remains, he grabs a book and pries it open. It seems like Declan encrypted his life's work to ensure that it wouldn't get stolen. Be that as it may, our boy can easily use his comprehension skills to bypass this issue. It's thanks to that he's able to cast open a golden bright light, hinting at the significance of his incredible research. Thanks to his attributes, wealthy magnate and sharp eyesight, he can tell that this book is definitely valuable. Despite that, the research seems incomplete, with many pages ripped in between and left unfinished. But even after all its flaws, it shone brightly, once again hinting at the research's significance. Surprisingly, Declan spots a pendant with a picture of Ephraim Luna and her father. This helps him piece together their relationship. Turns out that her father was working under him as a researcher. That's why the Luna family despises Professor Declan, who tortured her father for his own fame. It's because of Declan that Ephraim has navigated a brutal life. But now, things will be different. He's made up his mind to complete the research with the help of his comprehension skill, and right after its completion, he's going to add her father's name as a contributor to the research as a co-author. Character development in a way you didn't expect. The scene switches to one of the cafes of the university. Here, some of the commoners have decided to band up as their own group, sticking for each other in the time of need. If they don't, the nobles will pull the rug from under their feet. Asking for Ephraim's opinion, the girl puts her on the spot. Ephraim doesn't know how to feel about the situation. After all, she is a fallen noble herself. Still, she's fine with forgetting about her previous life, because right now, she doesn't even have a residence in her name. The orange-haired girl proudly accepts Ephraim as one of their own, the rest of them denoting her as the representative of the commoners. One of the girls, donning a shorter hairstyle, suggests they get permission from a professor to approve their club officially. It seems like the biggest obstacle in their path at the moment. At first they bring up Professor Relin, but knowing his attitude for always protecting nobles, he's out of the count. Then there's Professor Carmel, who also shuns commoners. One of them adds that Professor Declan wouldn't be a good pick either. While this is happening, Ephraim is too busy salivating at the sight of a beautiful strawberry dessert. The orange-haired girl erupts in confidence, believing that they should definitely ask for Professor Declan's help. They're all hoping that Ephraim will be the one to make the request on their behalf, a role that she clearly didn't sign up for is evident by her shocked expression. One guy agrees, believing that Declan's their best shot, as he looks down on everyone, no matter the status. The fact that Ephraim escaped punishment thanks to him is enough to conclude that Declan favors her a bit. Or at least that's what these guys think. The girl clarifies that there's nothing of the sort going on. She genuinely feels upset that the conversation has taken a shift like this. Ephraim wants nothing to do with Declan after all. Refusing the request, she bolts away. But the orange-haired girl chases after her anyway, hoping that she'll reconsider it once more. Ephraim clarifies that whatever they're thinking is not going to happen. Julia suddenly freezes at the sight of someone. Ephraim wonders what caused her to stagger like that. It's only when she turns to meet Declan's gaze that she realizes it's the devil himself. She certainly wasn't expecting to encounter him in the worst timing possible. Julia runs the heck away, leaving it all to rest on her shoulders. Ephraim is there, not knowing what to say, as the professor is already leaving. Hesitating, she makes her move, grabbing his attention. She requests the creation of a club that requires an approval from his end. In the end, this tsundere mustered up the will to ask him despite her embarrassment. She reasons that he usually doesn't approve requests from commoners, which is why she is also worried. Though Julia's approach was ridiculous, her suggestion was actually right. Ephraim believes they should just try their luck and see if it works. To her shock, Declan takes the letter and actually signs it, even requesting a note of details to be sent to his office. Ephraim is starstruck as she's handed the paper back, unable to believe that he actually approved the creation of the club. She just can't figure out his damn personality. Julia runs all giddied up, thankful that Ephraim successfully managed to get a signature. Meanwhile, the troubled girl wonders why he's doing all of this. He's being exclusively nice to her for no reason. Fast-forwarding to the lecture, Declan teaches the students about elements, which are supposed to be the building blocks of magic. And yet, many mages are still unaware about the difference between categorical and pure elements. As he's giving his lecture, Ephraim's thoughts drift away elsewhere, not knowing if the professor's actions are rooted in guilt or even sympathy. This man, the one who drove her father to his grave, despite his nice gestures, all of it feels fake to her. She thinks that if he truly feels responsible, then he should drop the act and reveal the truth to the world. Seeing her visibly fidget in annoyance, Julia wonders if she's all right. This snaps the girl out of her contemplation. Julia thinks her friend is annoyed because of the students across the table. Ephraim is confused at first, but quickly realizes that it's the nobles along with Sylvia, who have a terrible impression of her. After all, her stunt from that day made her an enemy of every noble family. Ephraim tells Julia that it's all right. She just wants to focus on the lecture for now. Zooming in on Deculane's lecture, he explains the significance of magic circles. However, she knew that his lectures used to be different. Right now, Deculane is expertly explaining how each spell is affected by adding strokes to the magic circle. He furthers the main topic of learning for today, something he terms flowing fire. The thing is, Ephraim is right. Deculane's lectures initially used to be a showboat of his talents and authority as a professor, but the lectures conducted by Kim Woojin right now were recreations of the beauty of magic, and they showcased a fundamental understanding of magic. It shocked the students, even Sylvia, who had once forgone her childlike curiosity of magic because of her natural-born aptitude as a mage. Deculane continues, showing them the magic circle responsible for water. Combining this with the fire circle, it creates a unique phenomenon. The purple magic circle steals the attention of the crowd, allowing liquid smooth fire to flow like water. The students are thrilled and amazed. Sylvia most notably can't believe that his lectures challenge such theoretical depths. Typically, mages deemed geniuses actually conjured magic using their intuition and natural talent. Theory meant very little to them, and if every mage prioritized theory, then that meant the commonality of magic in one container. It's true that focusing too much on theory could steal all your time from actually learning magic through understanding and intuition. Theoretical understanding is usually terrible and obstructive to the learning process. That's the unfortunate paradox. To become a genius, one must be blessed with brilliant intuition, and yet, not even the elites can explain the root of their intuition. For a genius professor with his bundle of rumors, it's shocking to her that Deculane is insisting on teaching theoretical classes despite his rank. When the lecture is finished, Ephraim is left with a changing impression. She certainly didn't expect the professor to be so good, to the point she found herself glued to the lecture. Ephraim's attention is stolen when she hears a mountain of slurs coming from the other side of the door. She knows it's the annoying nobles who want to harass her. That whole conflict with Sylvia made everything worse. To her surprise, she spots a sponsorship certificate underneath her door. Of course, her initial reaction is that it must be a damn prank. There's no way she got sponsored when everyone in House Elad hates her. Ephraim gives the situation credit, recognizing that she can later use this in a report. So she happily goes to the magical administration office, only to find out that this little piece of envelope is as real as it can get. She remembers her body jolting when the receptionist verified the authentic seal. Ephraim's face blooms with happiness. She can't contain her joy at all. The girl even tries pulling her face, wondering if this is some kind of sick dream. Then she cowardly checks her surroundings, afraid that someone must have spotted her reaction. Ephraim shrinks underneath the table, afraid that people will soon find out her ownership over 100,000 elne. To give you guys a good idea of the amount, it's equivalent to 100 million won. This girl is so scared, in fact, she's already packing her stuff in hopes of escaping when shit goes down. Even the staff members seemed suspicious and gave her a good look. Ephraim is losing her marbles when her tantrum leads to hitting her head on the table. This dork is convinced that it's no longer a dream. The absurdity of the situation makes her weep. The girl who was alienated all this time finally had her talents recognized. It fills her with the optimism to try harder for her life. I don't know about you guys, but I think this scene is a good example of showing how a token of kindness can restore someone's faith in the world. I really liked it, and I hope you did too. Anyway, let's get serious and visit the Euclid Manor. Here, Deculane's half-sister learns that he's currently headed to the auction site of Shatsenyevel. Bear with me, I know that's a weird-ass name. She's steaming in frustration, remembering how he had already wasted 10 million elne only last year. It makes her fear how much he's going to waste this time around. At the auction site, we come to see our boy, who has been longing to buy something worth his time. Back when he first began using telekinesis magic, the professor had realized he needed a kind of metal to make up for his sorry excuse of a talent. It's going to be a replacement for a temporary fix that he made using wood steel. The real deal will be here at the auction site today, which is why he's in the VIP waiting room. There, he spots a familiar figure. It's his fiancée, yet again another unexpected occurrence. She sees him, gets up with an angry glare, and turns to confront him. The knight is practically irritated with his damn appearance. It's the definition of your girlfriend getting mad at you for ignoring her. Julie brings up the occurrence of Sylvia and Ephraim, whom he had detained to be judged before the committee. Knowing that it's pretty old news, the mage questions why she's bringing it up, and if she's going to blame him for that. Julie holds a stern expression, hounding him for crushing the dreams of newbie students through his annoying attitude. She highly advises him against repeating past mistakes. Julie finishes up by saying that it's her final piece of advice for him, her words hinting at an indication of a breakup. Calming his mind, Daculian understands her intentions to break the relationship. But in reality, he actually favors this turn of events. Despite her enamoring appearance, he doesn't really intend to marry a woman over something insignificant, even in a fake life. Then there's the fact that she's a walking red flag full of death variables for him to encounter. This means the dude could literally face death on the day of their marriage. Daculian chooses to remain silent until she turns away, his thoughts wondering why she came here, knowing she's not the type to attend auctions. Choosing to annoy her, he provokes Julie by asking if she came all the way here to get on his nerves. It embarrasses the girl, who brushes away any such thoughts, stating that she came here looking for something. Daculian tells her to calm down, because the chick went from 0 to 100 in the span of a second. She's left all pouting and annoyance. Julie continues leaving, and it's the first time Daculian thinks cute of her expression. Suddenly, he catches himself experiencing a sharp and sudden emotion. Right when he was reasoning just how dangerous it would be to surround himself with her, it's as if Kim Woo-jin is slowly being tainted by Daculian's personal emotions. So far, he's kept his personality in check. An announcement addressing the visitors of the auction house is made. The auction is about to begin. Daculian brushes away such meaningless thoughts, believing that it's just his body reacting this way. Back to the scene of the auction house, he's patiently awaiting as the first item gets revealed. It's a special vase made by a unique artisan from the East. Its significance is so loud that golden shimmers of light reach all the way to Daculian, the same light he checked with his research papers. The light's insistent glow is proof that he should get it. The host entertains a bunch of bids, until Daculian bids the highest at 2.5 million elne. The item is sold at the immediate price. The only reason he acquired the vase is because it represents a greater value than the money put up for it. He's got more than enough in his mega bank account. I'm serious. This guy has 200 million in his damn account. Andrew Tate who? A bunch of high-value items are all snatched by Daculian, including a special ring, a pair of special scissors, and a rune necklace. Even after all of that, this man has the gall to bid for 5.5 million. The people at the auction house are shocked to find Professor Daculian making such wild bids. His fiancée, on the other hand, deems him as a mere attention seeker with nothing better to do with his life. She thinks their personalities clash too much, as he wasted so much money without cause. Still, she came here with a goal of her own. She wants to obtain the winter's fire for herself. The host finally presents the last object of the auction, an item so rare that it's impossible to find, an ore representing great history. It's the magic of nature itself, the winter's fire. The ethereal snowflare stone is revealed in all its beauty, stunning both Daculian and his fiancée. This stone is one of the 10 rarest metals found in the game. Normally used to forge swords, this item is the height of paradoxical wonders, maintaining the essence of both heat and cold energies. Only dragon bones surpass them in value. Still, it's Daculian's best bet, but Julie is also invested. Parties place their bets all the way up to 30 million elne. Julie is extremely confident in her bid and is about to win, her face lighting up with happiness. But then, one man intervenes, placing an offer of 31 million elne, stealing the limelight. She turns in annoyance, unable to accept what his damn fiancé is scheming. She doesn't want him to interfere with the only object she's after. She places a bid of 32 million, which is countered by 33 million by the professor. They're a bit surprised that the professor wants to obtain a sword-forging stone. They wonder if he wants to give it to his fiancée. They all think it must be the reason he's preventing her from making the purchase. Daculian all of a sudden realizes that he's fighting against Julie so far. This confirms her personal ambitions to obtain the snowflake stone, which means if he obtains the object, she'll carry a grudge for life. At the same time, he wants it badly, because it's the first time in 3 years that the stone has made its appearance. While it's a gamble, a major risk, Daculian is ready to walk that line. So he's ready to meet Julie with his fullest might. The price shoots up all the way up to 42 million, and it's at that number that the object is sold to Professor Daculian. The people applaud in the epic battle that took place, which is funny because when you really think about it, these guys were just flaunting money. They also think Julie is the one who was being overly stubborn, because in their worldview, Daculian obtained the stone to give it to her to begin with. Right now, the knight is fuming, her blood boiling in anger. The events have all conspired similarly to last year. Daculian offered her riches and jewelry to enjoy on her engagement day, but she vividly remembers it as the worst day of her life. Damn, the worst she could say is no, always ends in disaster. The Daculian of that time wanted to flaunt his power and wealth, which is why she detested him so much. She felt humiliated if anything, her face showcasing her annoyance. All this time, there's only one thing she's been wanting from Daculian, and he refuses to give it to her. And no, you perverted gremlins, I know what you're thinking, but that's not what it means. Leaving the room, she ruined her engagement day for herself. But that act left a bruise on the professor's ego. Despite her dignity as a knight, she ended up in a relationship with a professor with a shitty personality. Of course, she was granted captaincy for it, but people gossiped all kinds of nasty rumors around her. She knew all too well that he was responsible for spreading those crappy rumors to begin with. It only made her hate him even more, and it was that day she decided that this man was unworthy of her love. Right now, Julie is facing a similar feeling, but to her surprise, her fiancé is approaching her. Donning a soft expression, he asks if she was after the snowflare stone as well. Beaming in fury, she takes it as a provocation, ready to argue with him. But Julie is completely shocked when she hears the words, "I'm sorry," releasing from his mouth. She takes a second to process what the heck he just said. Daculian politely takes his leave, having paralyzed her on her feet. Julie's mind is racing with a billion thoughts, not knowing the purpose of his apology. She knows that Daculian isn't even the type to apologize. As she's walking away, she finds the majestic Josephine, her older sister, who tells her to come for a ride. The scene cuts to the professor, who understands Julie's frustration for having taken her object of interest. It's pretty surprising that he didn't encounter any death variables despite what happened. It only makes him wonder about Daculian's original asshole personality, which led her to take his life in one of the routes. In any case, he is welcomed home by his maids, who seem to be visibly upset by something. When they mention Yariel's visit, Daculian freezes at the sight of his half-sister. The girl vanishes and appears right behind him, confronting him for having spent so much money recklessly. She wanted to spend it on mines, and yet here he is, casually dwindling it on an auction. To salvage the situation, he tells her that he brought something that will return them the money with profit added on top. But of course, his sister is extremely pissed, pinning him as a man who is using her like a disposable piece of garbage. Even Daculian understands that the current situation is dangerous. His poor sister is sobbing that she's only there to clean up the consequences of his reckless actions. I honestly think she's so valid for confronting him. Yariel highlights their financial troubles, with her doing her best to support them, and yet he spent all of her precious money. Her aura shifts in a tinge of red, her voice adopting a serious tone, marking him as an asshole who gambled all of the money that rightfully belonged to their estate. Daculian is on red alert by his sister's pulsating dangerous aura. His villain's fate attribute activates at the sight of danger, meaning he's near enough a death experience. There's also the sight of a golden light coming from her aura, which leads him to an understanding. If he doesn't do something about the situation, he's destined to die. And if he does intervene, it may rack in a lot of profits. It's basically an opportunity hidden in catastrophe. Of course, Daculian knows just the way to handle this situation. He tells Yariel not to worry, which is arguably the worst way to handle the situation after what she just said. She roars at him with her concerns, highlighting every single problem she went through, the struggles she faced just for the sake of her ungrateful ass of a brother. In response, Daculian tells her that she didn't have to suffer through all of that. Again, Yariel points to him for being the reason they actively lost so much money after the death of their parents, and the fact that he obliterated $150 million in one day is no joke. To make her shut up, Daculian shocks her with a declaration. He's ready to hand her the position of the head of the house. It stops her dead in her tracks, unable to comprehend what he just said. Daculian reiterates his point, confirming that he'll do exactly as he said. Yariel went from nearly murdering him to now being flustered at his comment. She thinks he's fucking around, but he thinks she's just dragging it out. Daculian even states that he's ready to swear on it if she's refusing to accept his words. Yariel is shocked that he's willing to go as far as to take a dangerous oath, risking death just to keep his word. She doesn't know where all of this is coming from, even wondering if he suffered a concussion on the way here. Her brother is fine with her refusing to believe him. Yariel inevitably accepts, though she's ready to put him in the grave if he goes back on his words. Saying so, she leaves immediately to fix his latest mess. With Yariel gone, Daculian gains 2 points for preventing a death variable. He takes a sigh of relief, grateful that nothing major happened. He's fine with handing over the position without worry. He thinks if things continue to flow at this rate, his escape is near. Interestingly, Ganesha surprises him with her presence, commenting that his words were really true, that he's adamant on changing. She leaps in, apologizing for dropping by. She couldn't believe her eyes just now. Daculian thinks it's nothing special. His sister would just make up for a better househead than him. The adventurer reveals the truth about his sister Yariel, who doesn't have an inkling of the Eucliani family's blood. This comes as a shock to Daculian's system. He never could have predicted this turn of events, as it wasn't even supposed to be in the original game. Ganesha drops a bombshell that his sister doesn't have a single drop of Eucline's blood in her. He'd already known that they weren't directly related, but learning that there was no blood connection at all still comes as a surprise. Seeing his reaction, Ganesha reminds him that he was the one who requested the investigation in the first place. However, Deculane remains unfazed, stating that it doesn't matter to him. This response catches Ganesha off guard, as she never expected him to be so indifferent. Even so, she agrees to keep it a secret. As she turns to leave, she shares another piece of crucial news that the 6 snakeheads have begun to move. These individuals lead a notorious criminal organization, and each of them carries a bounty worth millions. Before leaping out the window, the adventurer pauses to warn Deculane. The 6 snakeheads are after the item he purchased at the auction, and he should be more cautious. It seems like he's been neglecting his magical defenses lately. With that, she vanishes into the night, leaving behind a white kerchief. As for the revelation about his sister, Deculane isn't bothered by it. To him it changes nothing. After all, he isn't the real Deculane, and whether she's biologically related or not, he will always consider her family. Meanwhile, in the forest, Ganesha and her men sit around a campfire, discussing Deculane's recent change in demeanor. She seems flattered by his words, but one of her men teases her, pointing out that she has always had a soft spot for handsome men, making her opinion biased. Ganesha, now furious, threatens to cut him into pieces. As the argument escalates, Rayleigh, an adventurer and a relative of Julie, expresses her surprise at Deculane's apparent human side. Dusting herself off, Ganesha confirms the change and assures everyone that they no longer need to find a magic slave for Deculane. She suggests they return and instructs the group to keep everything they heard today a secret. With that, they activate teleportation magic, vanishing into the sky in a bright flash. The next day, inside the magic tower at Imperial University, Deculane browses the system store and comes across a level 1 attribute that enhances both mana output and quality. However, it costs 10 and although he now has access to the store, he lacks the necessary currency to purchase anything. The store only allows skills to be bought using store currency, which is limited per level. Each time he gains access, the cost of skills doubles. Deculane understands that he can't afford to rush or waste this opportunity. He has been carefully integrating his training into his routine, but he recognizes that his physical strength is lacking. To improve, he needs better mana quality, which will allow him to train more effectively. He requires 4 more store currency to make the purchase and decides to find a way to obtain them quickly. As he considers his next move, Alan arrives, looking concerned. He hands Deculane the latest issue of Wizard Journal. Flipping through the pages, Deculane spots a wanted notice for a man known as the Wizard Killer, Lockhart, who has been seen roaming the outskirts of the area. Deculane is well aware that the Wizard Killer poses a serious threat to mage players and has already started making appearances. However, since he is not an ordinary mage, he isn't too concerned. Instead, he sees this as a valuable opportunity to earn store credits and secretly hopes to encounter him. Turning to Alan, Deculane reassures him that there's no need to fear and instructs him to head to the library and wait there. Then, out of nowhere, he asks Alan if he wants to become an assistant professor. The unexpected question leaves Alan completely stunned. He can't believe Deculane would recommend him for such a position, especially when he has always criticized his lack of talent. As Alan bombards him with questions, Deculane simply tells him to be quiet and hands him a bangle engraved with the Eucaline emblem. Overwhelmed with excitement, Alan thanks him, while Deculane considers how useful Alan's skills in organizing documents and handling minor errands will be in the future. He doesn't want him to leave, especially since many who resented Deculane's cold nature have already walked away. Yet Alan remained loyal, handling everything without complaint. To further support him, Deculane gives Alan a generous sum of money and suggests he treat himself to a good meal. With that, Deculane heads to the staff-only library, leaving Alan in shock. His purpose for visiting is to study Luna's research papers on the creation of pure elements. However, as he reviews them, he finds numerous mistakes and decides to correct them. He is also searching for valuable grimoires related to manipulation magic. As he walks through the library's aisles, his gaze lands on Sylvia, who is browsing through the books. She shouldn't be there as it's staff-only library. 10 minutes earlier, Sylvia had been searching for study materials in the executive reading room, a space typically reserved for faculty members. The librarian, initially reluctant, is overridden by the professor, who grants Sylvia access, citing her status as Ilad's successor and the current year's rookie mage. With no choice but to comply, the librarian allows her to browse freely. Sylvia, whose passion lies in studying literature and languages, has come specifically to find a novel written in FNL, the language of the long-extinct fairies, making such books extremely rare. This rare find is precisely why she has entered a place normally off-limits to her. As Deculane approaches, Sylvia remains unaware of his presence until he directly confronts her, questioning why she is in the executive reading room. He warns her about setting a disciplinary committee on her again. Caught off guard, she recalls rumors about Deculane's dislike for libraries and wonders if he intends to summon the disciplinary committee. She explains that she has received permission from Professor Relin to be there while searching for a particular document. Dekulin quickly realizes that both the professor and the librarian have ignored school regulations, and in his view, all those involved should be reprimanded. Just as Sylvia processes his words, he picks up the book she is holding and immediately recognizes it as an Ethanel novel. He questions her ability to read it, though he acknowledges that this isn't the main concern. Sylvia defends her interest in literature and languages, but Dekulin lets it go for now, warning her that any future rule-breaking without authorization will result in disciplinary action. He advises her to have someone else borrow books on her behalf, rather than relying on her family's influence. As Dekulin walks away, Sylvia silently fumes, feeling humiliated by his words. Sylvia had only wanted to understand the fairies, yet Dekulin had challenged her ability to read the novel, citing the inconsistencies in the Ethanel language. However, he hadn't given her unauthorized presence much weight. Meanwhile, in the jungle, a group of adventurers are navigating a dense forest while hunting a magical beast. Dekulin observes them, noting their steady composure despite this being their first practical training session. They are in the Mountain of Darkness, a place of significance and strict security for the Magic Tower. These forests also serve as the training ground near the university, known for its abundant magical resources. However, the area is also highly dangerous due to the presence of venomous creatures, leading the Magic Tower to enforce protective barriers and constant patrols. Professor Relin is worried that currently, the position of head professor overseeing this area is vacant. To everyone's surprise, Dekulin steps up and volunteers for the role, earning the approval of his colleagues. As he takes charge, another professor silently acknowledges that this is exactly how a leader should act. Internally, Dekulin is driven by a side quest notification, the Darkness of the Magic Tower, which offers store currency and an additional achievement reward. A mysterious pull draws him toward the mountain, likely the true reason behind this quest. This quest signals a major shift in the game, turning it into a horror experience. As the head professor is decided, everyone starts to pack up and start the venture. 9 hours later, at the cafe near the Magic Tower, Ephraim and her friends are enjoying snacks. Celebrating her achievement of reaching 100,000 NA, she eagerly offers to treat them. Their conversation drifts toward the anticipated approval of their club and plans for their first gathering. Her friend brings up a recent training session at the Mountain of Darkness, where 50 participants had volunteered despite occasional mishaps. Suddenly, a scream cuts through the air, followed by a tremor. Rushing outside, they spot someone running and crying out for help. Julia hesitates, sensing that something is wrong, and shouts for Ephraim to stop, but she keeps running. After a short distance, Ephraim stops, turns around, and is shocked to see that her friend has vanished. Disoriented, she finds herself in an unfamiliar location, completely separated from her friends. Recalling the person who had been calling for help, she spots a figure and calls out to them. However, as they approach, she quickly senses danger. The person lets out a horrifying scream, revealing a monstrous form. Now certain she is under attack, Ephraim readies herself to fight. Just then, Dekulin unexpectedly appears, startling her. She immediately accuses him of harming the woman, questioning his authority to attack a civilian. Dekulin, unfazed, tells her to take a closer look. As the illusion fades, it becomes clear that the figure is not human but a demon. Dekulin explains that Sylvia had been caught in a deceptive spell, a common trick used by demons. Ephraim attempts to step in, but Dekulin coldly tells her to stay out of it. The demon suddenly lunges at Dekulin, forcing him to engage. Furious at its attempted escape, he launches into battle, demonstrating his overwhelming power. Dekulin, analyzing the creature, identifies its primary ability as illusion magic and notes the glowing core on its forehead. Thanks to his own resistance to mental attacks, the demon's illusions have no effect on him. Dekulin's blood boils with rage, a result of his inherited Eucaline lineage, one known for its exceptional strength in hunting demons. This bloodline not only purifies surrounding mana and enhances its quality, but also intensifies the user's aggression. The ancient legacy of the Eucaline line, feared for its relentless pursuit of demons, comes alive within him. Dekulin, fully embracing his instincts, swears to destroy the creature. His fury surges as the monster demon charges at him with all its power. Meanwhile, Dekulin just completes the side quest, earning store currency and officially defeating his first demon. With the Eucaline attribute now unlocked, he calls the creature filthy before finishing it off. However, upon closer inspection, he is shaken by its appearance. A realization strikes him. The presence of this demon is not random. It is a sign that the game, even without a player, is moving forward. The next day, in the university building, Ephraim wakes up disoriented and terrified, letting out a scream as she finds herself in a ward bed. The nurse beside her asks if she is awake. Ephraim vaguely remembers being in the forest but struggles to recall specific details. The nurse informs her that a demon had appeared at the Mountain of Darkness and that she had been caught in its illusion, causing her to lose consciousness. She was found and brought to safety. Much to her frustration, she learns that it was Professor Decollane who saved her. Looking at the clock, she asks what day it is, only for the nurse to shock her by revealing that she has been unconscious for 36 hours. It is now Wednesday, meaning she is already late. Spotting her two friends, Ephraim rushes to class, barely making it in time. Her friend, relieved to see her, expresses concern, explaining that she had visited the clinic while Ephraim remained unresponsive. As they settle in, they discover that today's lesson will be a special class. Moments later, Deculin enters, accompanied by Alan carrying a box. Ephraim, puzzled, wonders about his identity. Without hesitation, Deculin announces that this is Alan, who will be assisting him as a teaching aide. The students are surprised by Deculane's decision, as he was known for teaching alone. Many speculate that becoming his teaching assistant could be a way to build one's resume, though with Deculin, that seems unlikely. Ephraim is reminded of her father, who, despite his skills, was unable to secure a teaching assistant position at 30. She questions Deculin's sudden decision to take on a mage as an assistant. Deculane announces that today's lecture will be based on experience. The students, including Sylvia, are given a 3-hour task with a timer. As Ephraim begins her assignment, she can't shake the thoughts of her father's inheritance. She notices a similarity between her bracelet and Deculine's, making her question her father's past relationship with Deculine and his recent generosity. She resolves to complete the task. Meanwhile, Sylvia finishes in just 25 minutes and 15 seconds. Her peers are astonished, noting she didn't even take half an hour. Alan and Deculin observe silently, and after a brief moment, Deculin permits Sylvia to leave. Though relieved, Sylvia is filled with hatred toward him. Ephraim struggles with her task as time passes. One by one, Deculin dismisses the students once their 3 hours are up. Eventually, only Ephraim remains. She knows she is done for and slams her head on the table, trying to think of something. Recalling Sylvia, she realizes that not only did she fail to surpass her, but she was also the only one who accomplished nothing by the end of the class. She calls herself stupid for being unable to complete such a simple task. Berating herself, she mutters that she is incompetent and a failure. As she sinks deeper into despair, she suddenly hears Deculin's voice, revealing that 5 hours and 40 minutes have already passed. He asks how much longer she intends to make him wait. Shocked, Ephraim looks up, realizing he is still there. Meanwhile, Deculin criticizes her for failing to complete such a simple assignment on time and even having a breakdown over it. He tells her that no matter who mocks her, surpasses her, or even if someone she resents stands before her, she must remain cold and logical at all times. He declares that with such a weak mindset, she will never reach his level. His disappointment is evident as he turns and walks away. Ephraim sits there, stunned and in despair. The room is empty, and the clock continues ticking. She slams the table in frustration, remembering Deculane's cutting words about trusting in her. Refusing to accept them, she repeats his words to herself. As her frustration builds, a green power flares from her bracelet, its aura surrounding her. Fueled by determination and anger, she declares that she will do it, no matter what it takes. Meanwhile, Deculane reflects on the recent events on schooling Ephraim. Though he spent considerable effort on Ephraim, he believes it was necessary. She must grow stronger for the challenges ahead. The appearance of a demon at the Mountain of Darkness is a signal. The main quest is about to begin. During the coming age of overwhelming evil, characters with strong moral alignments will emerge, including a much stronger Ephraim. Right now, she lacks mental fortitude and a true sense of a mage's responsibilities. But Deculane anticipates her overcoming these weaknesses and growing into a formidable force, one that could potentially threaten him. Yet Deculane, a firm believer in self-reliance over fate, is confident he can prevent that. He refuses to let a newcomer surpass him. Ephraim steps out of the classroom, pauses briefly, and then rushes to Deculane's office. There, she presents the results of her magic assignment. Deculane notes that it took her 6 hours and 25 minutes to complete. While acknowledging her shortcomings as a non-academy graduate, he cannot deny the quality of her work. It is worthy of first place. With this, a side quest is completed, granting store currency. Now that Ephraim has returned, Deculane decides it's time to head home. However, as he walks, a white-haired man intercepts him. Deculane recognizes him as Zeit Varon Bruggen, Julie's older brother and the head of the Freyden family, to which Julie belongs. He is also the one who strongly pushed for Deculane and Julie's betrothal. Zeit is formidable, ranking above Ganesha in combat strength, a named character renowned for his prowess. However, Deculane is confused as to why someone like Zeit would seek him out. Immediately, he begins to speculate about Zeit's intentions, suspecting that this encounter might have something to do with Julie's snowflare stone. Though Deculane bears no hostility towards Zeit, He remains on guard, uncertain whether this meeting poses a serious threat. Zeit, however, just voices his concerns regarding Deculine and Julie's recent interactions. He casually suggests they have dinner together, framing it as a friendly gathering. Deculine, seeing little choice, agrees without hesitation. Satisfied with a quick response, Zeit assures him that he'll arrange everything and even tailor the menu to Deculine's preferences. Deculine quickly realizes that Zeit has carefully planned this meeting, leaving him no room to refuse. Understanding how much Zeit values his family's standing, Deculine knows that going against his plans could be risky. The following day, at the Frieden household, Julie reacts with immediate frustration upon hearing about the dinner. She expresses her disdain for Deculine, arguing that her rigorous training schedule leaves no time for such events. Zeit, however, dismisses her complaints, calling her reaction childish over something as trivial as a snowflare stone. Growing irritated, Julie listens as Zeit speculates that Deculine must have purchased the rare metal, typically used for forging weapons, with the intention of giving it to her. He goes further, stating that if Deculine were to present it as a gift, she would likely end the engagement on her own. Julie's frustration only grows, but Zeit remains firm. With his anger boiling, he advises her to think carefully, reminding her that emotions have no place in political matters. He pointedly asks if she harbors any romantic feelings, noting that, as far as he knows, there aren't any men who love her. She immediately denies it, insisting it's nothing like that. Zeit then asks if her concerns stem from Deculine's poor record, but she also denies that, stating it has nothing to do with him. Her response only irritates Zeit further. However, despite his frustration, he accepts her answer. Preparing to leave, he instructs her to be on time and to resolve any lingering issues before the meeting. As soon as Zeit leaves, Julie, unable to control her emotions any longer, lashes out, swinging her sword with tremendous force in a fit of rage. Her slashes create a powerful blast, shaking the surroundings. Meanwhile, her subordinates stand behind her, silently observing. Witnessing her outburst, the subordinate comments that her sword is turbulent. His name is Veron, a member of the Order of Hidakane and Julie's subordinate. Julie quickly apologizes for showing him such a disgraceful side of herself, but Veron understands. He also believes it is unfair for the current head of the household to pressure her into marrying someone like Deculine. Julie is warned not to speak ill of Deculine, though she insists that it doesn't matter to her. Seeing Veron fall silent, she turns away, ordering him to prepare as she gets ready to leave. Veron is deep in thought, contemplating the path he has chosen to prove his loyalty. It's a task that only he can accomplish, and he is determined to see it through, believing it will bring Julie happiness. At the Berkt Assembly of Elders, a conference is underway regarding the appearance of a demon in the Mountain of Darkness. The elders discuss the magecraft they developed using mystic arts to combat demonic entities, realizing that it is now time to take action. To address the situation, the conference leader orders his men to send letters to the 12 sorcerers, summoning them to Berkt. With that, the letters are dispatched. Meanwhile, Deculine finishes organizing the items he obtained from the auction. He prepares to equip Rufarin's ring, which enhances mana recovery, and the ancient rune necklace, designed to store mana. Following Ganesha's advice to prevent theft, he plans to secure the rest of the items in a vault. However, an issue arises. The Frostflame Stone isn't responding as expected. While he knew it wouldn't be easy to use right away, he is surprised that his telekinesis has no effect on it. Suspecting that the stone's mana is actively resisting him, he recalls spending a significant amount on it. He recalls reading about a related concept during his visit to the library, the idea of communion, a method used to tame legendary swords by establishing a connection with them. He wonders if this process involves forming an understanding of the sword itself. Deciding to attempt it himself, Deculine reaches out to the stone. The moment he makes contact, a sudden surge of energy pulses through him. To his surprise, he successfully gains a 0.1% comprehension of it, increasing his mana by 300. However, at this pace, he estimates that fully mastering it would take at least a year, as it demands an immense amount of mana. Wondering if this slow progress is his only option, he sets the thought aside for now and shifts his focus to his upcoming plans. Reviewing his schedule, he notes the dinner arranged by Zeit. However, upon noticing the date, he tenses. This event was scheduled before he possessed this body, and in just 3 days, the death anniversary looms. Both events weigh heavily on his mind. When Deculine arrives at the restaurant, Von Meschel, Veron is already there. Julie, who left earlier, should already be inside. Zeit greets her warmly, complimenting her appearance. Deculine, catching sight of her, is momentarily taken aback. She looks stunning, a stark contrast to her usual battle-ready attire. He acknowledges the effort she put into her appearance, feeling a sense of admiration. Another figure stands beside Julie, having helped her choose the dress. Deculine, focused entirely on Julie, hadn't even noticed him at first. Then, an unexpected introduction takes place. he meets Josephine, Julie's sister. She isn't just any relative. She is a named character he must tread carefully around. She's someone who would use any means necessary to get what she wants. In other words, she is a sociopath. She is the mastermind behind Shadow, an undercover intelligence network that operates behind the scenes and possesses strength comparable to that of Zeit. Her only real attachment is to Julie, and anyone who threatens her sister risks invoking her wrath. Deculain understands why Josephine hasn't acted against him yet, but the way she watches him makes it clear. Her hostility is just beneath the surface, and if he ever crosses a line with Julie, she won't hesitate. As he steps into the room, Deculain immediately recognizes the situation as a critical and potentially deadly obstacle. To navigate it safely, he must prove his sincerity regarding Julie. Zeit wastes no time and directly asks Deculain when he plans to hold the engagement ceremony, reminding him that 3 years have already passed. Before Deculain can respond, Julie interjects, but Zeit stops her, stating that the adults are talking. Deculain is about to reply but hesitates, troubled by the immense aura emanating from Julie's sister. Looking at her, he declares that he is leaving the relationship entirely in Julie's hands, stating that if she doesn't want it, he will gladly accept her decision. Julie is visibly shaken by this statement. Zeit, concerned by how easily the engagement could be dismissed, voices his doubts, stating that the family heads won't approve of such a decision. Still trembling, Julie turns to the head of the family and requests a private discussion. Zeit thinks for a moment, then agrees, and he and Julie's sister leave together. Deculain watches them go, trying to decipher Zeit's true intentions. Meanwhile, Josephine, holding a glass of wine, also wants to know what they are planning. Deculain thinks about Josephine and realizes that she is using some kind of skill to listen in on the conversation behind the door. Given her earlier laughter, he suspects it was merely a distraction to conceal a listening device. However, he sees this as an opportunity. If he can convince Josephine that his love for Julie is genuine, he might be able to neutralize this dangerous situation. Looking directly at Julie, Deculain begins to speak. He declares that he has already spoken his truth, leaving her confused. He insists that the engagement isn't something he can simply undo at will. At this point, things have progressed beyond their control. Growing frustrated, Julie questions his reasoning. She reminds him that before their engagement, he used her influence to arrange it, even negotiating with his family's elders by offering compensation. Julie's anger flares as she raises her voice. She accuses him of pushing her away from dangerous battles, pressuring her to abandon her pursuit of the Imperial Order and instead take charge of the Order of Hadakain, which operates under the Eucaline family's watch. She also brings up the rumors he spread about her after she refused. Her fury is evident. She cannot believe he is still resorting to these tactics. Deculain acknowledges her words, admitting that he has knowingly manipulated her and forced her to stay, committing actions that cannot be justified. Julie, understanding Deculain's resentment more than anyone, refuses to be deceived. She declares that she won't fall for his schemes. Deculain concedes that he has held Julie back and admits the wrongfulness of his actions. She listens as he shifts his focus, pointing out that both her older sister and brother have overstepped their boundaries. If not for the weight of family reputation, they would have no reason to oppose breaking the engagement. As Josephine silently observes, Deculain pushes his argument further. He tells Julie that if she truly wants to pursue her dream of becoming a defender, she must leave her family behind. Deculain, with a disarming tone, admits that he lacks both honesty and loyalty, leaving Julie in shock. He confesses that he embodies the very opposite of the values she upholds, making him an unworthy match for her. However, instead of breaking off the engagement, he suggests they remain betrothed but never marry. This would free her from the web of complicated interests surrounding them. Though he wishes he could let her go completely, he offers his name as a shield until she is ready to pursue her dreams. He promises to wait, keeping the engagement intact. Julie, stunned by his sudden shift in attitude, demands to know the reason behind it. Deculain assures her that he expects nothing in return, only that she smiles for him once a month. He declares that this is all he desires. His words leave Julie flustered, and even Josephine is momentarily taken aback. Deculain knows that he only said what Josephine wanted to hear to avoid an unpredictable outcome. Yet he acknowledges Julie's reaction, finding her embarrassment unexpectedly charming. Smirking, he concedes that she has managed to win him over in that moment. Julie, furious, snaps that she won't fall for his tricks. She finds his words humiliating, but if he is truly being sincere, she wants to see more proof. Josephine, flustered, begins to wonder if Deculain's feelings are actually real, and if that's the case, she decides to spy on them a bit longer. With that, Deculain successfully avoids a death variable and gains 2 store currency. 3 days pass quickly, and the anniversary of a significant death arrives. Deculain arrives at the cemetery in his car, making his way through with emotions stirring within him. The setting sun casts a golden glow over the overgrown grass and scattered tombstones. Though this place holds no personal significance for Declan, it does for Kim Woo-jin, his earlier self. A flashback unfolds, revealing a conversation between Kim Woo-jin and his team leader, In-yu. They discuss adding an Easter egg to Declan's background. In-yu suggests expanding his story with the author's approval, but Kim dismisses the idea, arguing that it's unnecessary and would only add to their workload. However, In-yu insists that it's worth it, emphasizing their commitment to the game. Kim eventually relents, though he questions its importance, especially since it has no direct connection to the main storyline. In-yu, however, finds the idea meaningful and insists that they must put their hearts into the game. Kim once again denies it, finding it meaningless and pointing out that In-yu didn't even ask for his opinion before deciding to include it. Still, she believes it's a good idea and won't be useless at all, as she claims that Declan has a bereaved fiancé in his past. Kim reflects on her past enthusiasm for creative additions, wondering what she found so intriguing about Declan's lost fiancé. He contemplates whether it was done for their team's sake or simply a way to care for those around her. He also wonders what kind of joke was hidden within the Easter egg that had once made her laugh. Back in the present, Declan searches for any remnants of Kim Woo-jin's memories, hoping to grasp the full picture. He questions whether In-yu's choices were acts of brilliance or cruelty. Eventually, he finds a tombstone engraved with the name In-yu Ara Vaughn, and wonders why her name ended up there. It is then revealed that Declan's character was modeled after Kim Woo-jin, and In-yu had chosen to use her own name for Declan's deceased fiancé. Declan wonders if she ever thanked him for it. Kneeling before the gravestone, he reaches out to touch it, emotions overwhelming him as memories of In-yu flood his mind. He recalls her sweet voice whispering to him, the day she praised his drawings, the way she gave him his coat, the way she loved him, and the 7 years they had spent together. As Declan recalls his memories of her, tears continue to fall from his eyes. However, someone else at the cemetery is furious upon finding him there. After a while, Declan walks out, realizing that he has stopped crying, something he attributes to his personality coming in handy. As he continues walking, he hears someone following him. Turning around, he sees Lockhart standing behind him, radiating killing intent. Lockhart, as Declan recalls from his name, is surprised that Declan already knows him. Lockhart, also known as the wizard killer Lockhart, is a mini-boss villain designed to be a nightmare for mages. His ability, magic nullification, makes him a direct counter to magic users. There are no real limits to his power beyond physical contact, allowing him to render magic completely useless within his range. Lockhart arrogantly boasts about his immunity to magic while relentlessly attacking. As he closes in on Declan, our boy swiftly dodges his relentless barrage of strikes, moving with precision. Lockhart is shocked. Most mages would have trembled in fear before him, yet this guy is effortlessly avoiding all his blows. Annoyed, he unleashes a powerful strike at Declan, only to be counterpunched in the face. Walking up to Lockhart, Declan calmly states that fighting him is meaningless. Several days ago, Declan finally managed to acquire 10-1 in store currency and purchased the mana improvement skill he had always wanted. This enhancement expanded his overall mana capacity. While testing it through repeated practice, he realized he would need to completely readjust, but he was thrilled to be able to unleash a greater amount of mana with the same effort. During his training, he discovered that the skill's effects extended over a larger range than expected. Then, as he grabbed his practice stick, he was shocked to see his hand sinking into it, making him realize that the skill had also increased his physical strength as a whole. After multiple attempts, Lockhart is finally defeated and lies on the ground in front of Declan, utterly beaten. Declan successfully overcomes the death variable, earning additional store currency. Reflecting on the fight, he acknowledges that while he initially believed his Iron Man attribute alone would be enough, the recent trade enhancements made the battle far easier than expected. Lockhart, stunned, refuses to accept defeat. Furious, he shouts trash talk at Declan, accusing him of being a traitor. Observing Lockhart's intense anger and unusual abilities, Declan quickly pieces together the truth. Lockhart is not an ordinary opponent. He belongs to the Red Film Race, a revelation that leaves Lockhart in shock. The Red Film Race, named for their distinct birth markings, are the descendants of demons. Scattered throughout the continent, they conceal their identities, as they are natural enemies of mages. Just as magecraft was originally developed to combat demons, the war between mages and the Red Film Race has been a defining conflict in the world. It is a major element of the game's lore. Standing over the defeated Lockhart, Declan realizes that, due to their heritage, the Red Film Race is constantly at risk. He suspects that a large-scale purge is underway. Though he understands the suffering Lockhart's people have endured, he points out that killing innocent mages would only turn him into the very monster he despises. Lockhart, furious, demands that Declan stay silent and finish him off. Instead, Deculane surprises him by expressing his belief that the red film are not inherently evil. Lockhart, disbelieving, accuses Deculane of hypocrisy. Deculane calmly states that the only time he has ever lost control of his instincts was when he faced a true demon, something ingrained in his Ukulane's bloodline. For generations, his lineage has hunted demons, and the reaction is buried deep within him. This is pure instinct for Deculane, something he cannot simply overcome. He questions whether he is losing his dignity and composure in front of Lockhart, or if he is wavering at his provocations. Making his point clear, he states that the red film are humans too and that he can trust them. As the other inspectors arrive, Deculane swiftly knocks Lockhart out cold to ensure he can be safely arrested without resistance. One of the inspectors introduces himself as Ropa. While praising Deculane's incredible kicking power, he asks if he should kick the criminal a few more times for him. Deculane waves it off, saying it's fine. Then, using his magic, he uproots a nearby tree, shocking the inspector. Transforming the tree into a neutralizing rope, he hands it over and suggests tying Lockhart with it, as normal cuffs won't work. After that, Deculane asks if Ropa was patrolling the area, as he arrived quite early. This surprises the inspector, who explains that he came after receiving a report, which he assumed Deculane had sent. Deculane brushes it off, suggesting that someone else who heard the commotion might have reported it. With that, Deculane leaves, entrusting the situation to the officer. As he walks back, he feels relieved that he resolved the matter without bloodshed. That's a good outcome. He doesn't want to hurt anyone if he can avoid it. The following day, Yariel arrives at Deculane's training room to deliver a letter from Berkt, who has called for a meeting for the first time in 15 years. Accepting it, Deculane wonders if Yariel really came all this way just for that, as he believes it should be his duty to handle such matters. Opening the letter, he reads about the recent demon incident that took place in the Mountain of Darkness. The Berkt are summoning all mages for a meeting to discuss the situation. This marks the beginning of a new main quest for Deculane, titled Berkt's Call. The meeting is set for a week later, and he is permitted to bring one guard along. Yariel suggests that Jeff accompany him, but Deculane immediately refuses, pointing out that Jeff is merely their driver and has no idea how to wield a weapon. Despite this, Yariel insists that he should take a guard, as the journey to Berkt is known to be dangerous. Hearing her concern, Deculane is slightly surprised that she seems worried about him. Flustered, she quickly clarifies, rather loudly, that she only cares because she doesn't want him to die. With a slight blush, she offers to handle the matter of selecting a guard on his behalf. Deculane agrees to let her take care of it. Meanwhile, at Freyheim's outpost, Julie is occupied with training young knights in sword fighting. A vice captain watches everything unfold, mumbling to himself about what course of action he should take. Suddenly, Veron responds to his thoughts, startling him as he hadn't even noticed Veron standing behind him. Taking a moment to calm down, the vice captain reveals that a commission has arrived for their order, but he is unsure if the captain will approve it. Veron encourages him to ask, but the vice captain hesitates, revealing that the commission involves guarding Deculane. In reality, the request is to protect the entire train he will be traveling on, as they knew that if it were only about guarding Deculane himself, it would likely be rejected. Veron, however, advises him to accept the commission, pointing out that successfully completing it would boost their order's reputation and improve their financial situation. Despite this, the vice captain still worries about Julie's reaction. Veron cuts him off, assuring him that their captain would never let personal feelings interfere with a mission. With that, the vice captain finally decides to approach Julie about the commission, while Veron lingers behind with his dark and unspoken expressions. Brecht, also known as Alpines, is a high-altitude, formidable region in the continent's north, commanding respect and authority at 3,500 meters. It's home to the Elders, a powerful group of mages. Every magic school across the land submits to their ideas here, with the magic tower playing a key role. But what really sets Brecht apart is the floating island of mages. Even the legendary mages have to follow the decisions made in this place. By the looks of its immense power status, Brecht takes the high honor of being called the magic world's central pillar. Even the rarely occurring summoning assembly every few decades is a great honor, also a mark of true renown for any attending renowned sorcerer. In spite of that, a summons to Brecht is a double-edged sword whispered to the mage's grave. Now that this man lets out a surge of man, the man's presence fills the area with oppressive power. Aside from that, the train to Brecht platform, normal life continues here, including the usual farewells and daily routines. While the preparations are in order, confirming the workers' details, the Anne assures everything is in hand. Aside from the silver-headed girl nodding in agreement, she gives away her approval for this. Just then, the silver-headed girl, who is assigned to handle this today, announces his arrival. A man with a sharp-suited demeanor, with his face utterly blank, enters the scene with a kid who is practically vibrating with excitement. This kid is totally wide-eyed to spot snow in April. He couldn't believe it was worth it. Out of nowhere, this girl steps in to inform the professor that from this point forward, the Order of Freyheim will be handling the guard dirty for the first half of the train. Professor struggles to keep a straight face when he spots Julie, completely losing it in a clustered panic. Her face switches really quickly from ghostly pale to bright red in mere seconds. Still, she stiffens up and reassures the professor that they will do their best to keep everyone safe and make the trip as smooth as possible. Right this moment, a flashback hits Julie, which kickstarts her total freak-out mode. She is barely holding it down. Professor's voice rings in her head, recalling the last time he advised her to try smiling once a month. In a full-blown panic French, this firecracker wonders if that's the right time to show off a big smile, a wide grin, or just a slight one. She is left thinking, what's the purpose behind this idiotic stunt? While the professor and her stand in awkward silence, the lot notices this crazy tension and gives respect to their captain. Even though she totally loathes his existence, she looks to be trying her hardest for his sake. Cutting down the fuss, Veron decides to show up finally, declaring to be handling their guard duty from this point on. The professor does a scan of Veron, the baddie who just pops up out of nowhere. He lets the big shot know he is tasked with keeping them in protection, while the other two are just here to win their respects. Laughing his head off, this comrade gives Veron a good, hard pat on the shoulder. He asks the dude to cut it out already. Then he drops a quick intro, revealing that it's Veron, the mighty, skilled man known by the whole order. He mentions this guy is dealing with their guard assignment while claiming they are in good hands. Not taking his word for it, Professor checks him out with his sharp eyesight. He could feel no special vibes coming off him, considering it could be just his overthinking mind tripping. Moving on, Veron describes the mages as having full-blown security, with one escort talked per cabin. Without further ado, he insists on assigning himself to their cabin. That settles it. Time for their departure. She wishes them a quick, nice trip. Then she bolts out of there, but a quick head turn while flashing a smile his way. This forceful grin might crack her face soon enough. Meanwhile, the professor is totally clueless about what's up with her. Her lackey wonders if Julie is right in her head. But the professor quickly realizes that this bimbo kept her word. Several hours later, he settles inside the train quite nicely. Professor informs Veron to catch a quick nap, as they have plenty of time to chill. At this thought, Veron decides to opt for a quick slumber. In the meantime, the professor's mind is left wondering over this summon from Brecht, aka the mage's grave. In his point of view, there's a big reason behind Brecht's superiority as the pillar of the magic world, while keeping up as the contrasting second face. He thinks it over if it has any relation to the unexpected events that rise to the occasion each time the summoning assembles comes by. Knowing the possibility of a train attack, he figures Decollane dies at the hands of a game of wits, and he isn't planning to choose the reckless way to go. For now, he is out to figure out which train guarantees their safety, while the red lingers with the fate of being blown up. For a quickie, this guy knows the cheat of buying intel to learn which train got the highest chances. Although this guy bets the original Decollane would have made it easier. But imagining the ominous freaks out there, Professor calls off all the dark connections after getting his hands on Decollane. That only led him to tighten his security. For this reason, he opted to learn the legendary technique of martial arts, Estrain using comprehension. Considering Alan's hype, it's weird to see him out cold. Days ago, Alan practically cried in happiness for having the chance to accompany him towards Brecht. However, the professor is about to have a quick change of heart when he sees Alan's dripping snot. Turns out the professor is one big germaphobe. Even then, he never thought Alan would pack an ambitious mindset to ride this trip. Soon reaching Brecht, he is quite shocked to see such a smooth ride in his wake. Even after blunt preparation, George's suit, jacket, and shoes level up his defensive capabilities and unleash his full potential of Midas Touch. Some time ago, thanks to Midas Touch's manipulative powers, helped him take Master of Clothes tailor to his needs. His wood steel shuriken got a major upgrade thanks to Midas Touch. He powered up numerous pieces of wood steel which were scattered throughout the train, and even tweaked into Alan's clothes just in case. Apparently, the professor used up protective robes and upgraded their integrity by using Midas Touch. Something still bothers him. Turns out, Professor's big use of Midas Touch kept his mana tank emptier than usual. Preparations were necessary, but he would like it if nothing happened. He sighs in relief, as he craves that he would like it if things were super chill and nothing happened. But nothing goes his way either. Just then, the front of the train explodes in flames. Snowy peaks were passing by just about a few days before Decollane took off. This guy requests Blondie to put away her book for once. Brewing a small talk, he tends to ask if Blondie gets tasked with a buttload of assignments at the Magic Tower. Well, she nods at the first part, but she confesses to missing a few classes every now and then. This cranky lady isn't exactly thrilled about this whole situation. But this chill dude lets it slide, assuring her that it's all good. Her father even throws in a couple of praises to lift Blondie's spirits, acknowledging her works. Even though her mind is fixed on becoming an archmage, she still gives out her best. At that wild thought, Blondie scoffs, as she is convinced there is no future as an archmage if she can't even manage simple things. After this blunt conversation, she has no worries that concern Ephorine. Even then, she wishes to hear out Deculane's theories on this. Right about now, Blondie wastes no time in asking her father's legitimate reasons for planning this trip a little earlier. As Brecht's assembly is after a few days, so why such a rush? With a sigh, her father enlightens her that the importance of the trip to Brecht is nothing short of the graveyard of mages. All of a sudden, Blondie's newfound curiosity craves to know more. At that thought, her father lets her know that it's a legit story, while she always thought of it as nothing but a bedtime story. This hits her like a thunderbolt. Dropping the brutal truth bomb, he claims that each Brecht's summoning somehow takes the lives of mages. A few of them never make it back alive like 15 years ago, a total score of 11 tasted death. Taking a look back, he describes to Blondie that receiving an invite to Brecht is a testament to their family's prestige. Being chosen among 20 families, there is no backing out of this one. Not to mention, attending this event would totally carve their names in history books. But absentees are destined to face harsh expulsion from the regime. Not to mention, any absent family gets kicked out pretty quickly, and a new one takes their spot with no fuss whatsoever. That's when her father checks out Blondie's smarts, asking if she can pick an easy way to clear out the prestigious trash. Taken aback, she couldn't believe her ears. As it turns out, the infamous trip to Brecht is more than just an assembly, and does a quick job of dumping out trash. This ruthless game of ambitious sorcerers targets to take down the existing ones, carving their own path to prestige. That said, her father rests his case on explaining why choosing to travel early. Apparently, this dude's sources leak intel about a shady group scheming to ambush the late departing trains. As a precautionary measure, her father decides to take her along for the ride. This old man thought to let Sylvia know, so she could face the world's cruelty with a sane mind. Out of 12 traditional families, he believes that all the sorcerers must receive a penalty for brewing this nonsense. Without skipping a beat, he is quick to admit that straight-up dying on their way to Brecht is basically just like dying a magical natural death. A few days later, Alan and Professor enjoy their cozy slumber in the train with no care in the world. Right then, out of nowhere, a huge explosion snaps Veron and Professor back to reality, while Alan freaks out to spot a blinding light. Panic rises high as Alan has trouble speaking out his concerns. Without missing a beat, the little guy jumps a mile high in shock to spot the train floating in midair. As it turns out, the professor's quick thinking of using telekinesis took hold of the train and put it right back on track. While Astarn's martial arts were impressive, memorizing telekinesis before their departure came in handy. In the meantime, a bunch of creepers lurking on the train's roof are plotting a major heist, taking down a train packed with nothing but professors. But their huge payout keeps them motivated, and they are ready to strike. Diving in head first, the professor smirks at this bunch of morons who think they can take on him. Knowing these dumb fools picked the wrong cart to mess around, their luck just ran out. Just now, Professor wastes no time, pulling out shards of wood and steel. He stabs the thugs and lets them have a taste of death. Alan's jaw practically hits the floor in shock, so Professor knocks the kid out as it's time to rest. Without further ado, he orders Veron to evacuate Alan and other passengers to safety, as he has a bone to pick with these thugs. That said, he tosses the filthy trash out of the train. That said, he figures that Iron Man's 5 senses would easily map out the differences, but no time to overthink here. The professor gets on board to handle things here and sort this mess out later. He turns to the remaining thugs, letting them know they signed their own deaths today. While Veron stands guard to Alan, the professor gets their show rolling, alongside lowering the explosive damage, putting the train back on track, and taking the thugs to their deaths. This all took a toll on his mana reservoirs. Left with 10:36:57, everything settles here while Veron notifies of safely evacuating each passenger. Out of the blue, professors feel something is off about Veron. He cannot shake off this feeling that this dude's gaze is downright unsettling, but he can't blame this guy for having his guard up. Apparently that's not it. Just then, Veron's body erupts with the murderous intent of the villain's fate. This catches Professor off guard. Seeing this sneaky jerk unleashing his true colors, he can't believe he actually let his guard down. Thus, Veron admires Professor's survival tactics, but he is ready to kill him with his own hands. Things just got seriously creepy in here. With everyone out to safety, Veron fulfilled his duty, which left him to get his reward. That means it's time for Professor Deculine to say goodbye, as it's game over already. Caught at such a bad time, with his mana battery already running dangerously low, the professor is completely taken aback. He never imagined his own guard would lift a blade against him. That said, curiosity takes hold, and he tends to ask Veron if he is acting alone or if someone's pulling the strings here. When asked if Julia is the mastermind behind this operation, Vernon's fury goes off the roof. boiling fumes, his murderous intent spikes as he glares at Professor, who got his breath numbered. That said, Veron orders Professor to quit mouthing his master's name from his filthy mouth. Dripping with fury, he warns Professor that any casual slip of the tongue might serve him much worse than what he has already planned. Even then, Veron thinks of Julia as an upstanding knight who wouldn't go to such lengths. His eyes are filled with bloodlust, and he is quick to announce that he plans on killing the Professor himself for Master Julia. With a look that screams kill, Professor can't seem to pinpoint what's wrong with this dude. To top it off, his most trusted Frehium guy turned out to be a maddening rogue. That wasn't on today's agenda. A trusted member of Frehium everyone looks up to who went down such a path, much to their dismay. With the remaining 10, Professor wonders if he has a shot against this powered-up beast with nothing to lose here. Without a second thought, he quits wasting time, claiming to no longer serve him as his guard. Giving off a fierce glare, he lunges forward at full speed. His blade cut through the air with a lethal intent to kill. That totally surprises Professor, leaving him no choice but to cancel telekinesis on this train. Just like that, the train goes off balance. Somewhere else, Sylvia's servant knocks on the door to see if Lady's ready to try out Breck's special snow cone. Without wasting another breath, this girl tells Sirio, the Elade's family, to eat it all. Aside from Professor Deculine and Rewind, Sirio claims that everyone has arrived. Sirio tends to ask if Sylvia is on hold for someone important, but no words come out of her mouth as Sirio leaves her be. After that, Sylvia takes a trip down memory lane. Feeling a pang of guilt, she watches the whole thing from a distance. The day she visited her late mother, Cielia von Elemen Ilade, was just another normal day. She poured her heart out and kept ranting about her school life and how this one teacher, Deculain, gets on her nerves. His never-ending assignments are a pain in the head, and he possibly thinks of himself as the only professor alive or something. But just then, a faint sound interrupts her chatter. Curiously, she peeks around the tombstones only to spot Deculain's noble posture. Deculain never gave off the vibes of a mourner, but Sylvia is totally thrown off to see him taking his time out to visit a grave. Honestly, he is full of surprises. Just as then, Sylvia's jaw hits the floor to see a teardrop sliding down Deculain's cheeks. She is rendered speechless by the sight of a tear falling from Deculain's eyes, breaking his nearly perfect picture of his icy demeanor. The icy, cold Professor Deculain cries, and Sylvia's entire perspective of him shifts greatly. At that moment, she couldn't see the high and mighty, arrogant professor, but someone who had lost someone dear to him. His tears look like shooting stars that live rent-free in her mind. That's when her father's intel crashes back into her thoughts. She recalls a shady groups scheming to attack the late-arriving trains. Growing anxious as Deculain hasn't made it to Brecht yet, she recalls his lecture notes. That motivates her to try out something, so she whips out a magic stone. Clutching this medium, she plans to make something out of this. Considering magic's 3 attributes built by using the caster as the source, she owns 3 primary colors of magic already. Channeling her mana, she shapes the magic stone into a bird. Swift. With a silent command, she passes her intentions, hoping it to be Sylvia's set of eyes. Swift takes a quick flight, ready to show her everything. Meanwhile, Professor Deculain is barely hanging in there with a few broken bones. Other than that, the train luckily didn't slide to the ground. Thanks to Iron Man, it would take a little time until he recovers soon. Hiding in there, out of sight, he thought he could buy himself some time, but Veron had other plans. That vicious freak out for Professor's blood wouldn't quit toying with him. Deculain can't believe this guy is still in one piece. He tries crushing his flesh when throwing a wood steel, but Veron dodges like a pro. His protective QI takes Professor by surprise, and Veron admires this dying dude's strong hold on life. Such a pitiful way to cling to life. These two engage in a fierce battle. In the meantime, the Professor has to admit Version had the upper hand all along. In his perfect condition, he knows defeating him wouldn't be an easy task. Right now, his mana battery is running super low and exhaustion weighs him down. This makes the odds roll totally against the Professor. Still, he isn't the type to go down without a fight. That said, the thought of Resolute pops into his mind. That's the ace up his sleeves now. This skill alone unleashes a full-fledged surge of mental power that lasts until the battle ends. However, if one resolves waivers, their body will remain standing and won't bend at all. With a disengaged mind, the magic would still work. Thus, Deculain won't ever bend in such a peril. Besides that, Veron is proving to be a raging monster out for blood and goes full beast mode at Deculain. Charging at him with his sword, Deculain knows that Veron's one cut and he is as good as dead. He is left wondering if he will wake up again in his office or not. Suddenly, a splash of blood paints the whole room red, and Swift races to the crash site as Sylvia's set of eyes. Veron's wild instincts go into overdrive and his mind goes haywire for vengeance. He leaps into action, ready to settle this once and for all. But something unexpected halts him in his tracks. A sudden interruption catches Veron's attention. He takes notice of the space around him wavering unnaturally, making him lose his footing and lower his guard. In that instant, Deculane's little trick plays out perfectly as he catches the lad off guard. In a flash, Veron's hand is suddenly split and thrown away with a fountain of blood. Letting out a blood-curdling cry, his screams cut through the chaos. But Deculane, still unsure of what just happened, knows one thing. It's time to end this battle. With the very last pinch of mana, he tosses a wood-steel weapon, knocking Veron further off balance. Fallen on the edge of the train, his life hangs at the doorway by a dagger, clinging to life with his leftover hand. Right then, Deculane steps out with the smirk of a victor. Veron, gasping for breath, demands to see his cards. He wishes to know what sort of trickery Deculane pulled at the last to flip the tables around. But even Deculane has no clue what happened. However, now that the fight has reached this end, Deculane finally sees a chance to get some answers and hears out Veron's reasons for killing him. Deculane is looking for answers, and he is fully aware of never having any beef with Vero. Thus, it doesn't make sense for him to go this far. Veron lays it out straight that Deculane wrongs his liege and committed unforgivable sins. That kick starts his brain into thinking if it's all for Julia. Raising an eyebrow, he questions why, even though Julia never asked for this. Pushing further, Deculane dares to ask who Julia is to him. With his strength failing, Veron has no answer to this. That question stings Veron, who believes that someone like Deculane wouldn't understand it at all. That sends Veron down memory lane. Julia once received high praise from the Frisia family for capturing this little pig. Turns out little Veron had gotten into a mess with some noble's brat, Jason, and was being framed as the troublemaker. But this brat's mommy wouldn't quit preaching about how kind her son is. Little Veron wouldn't budge and cursed that little jerk, refusing to back down. That ticks off the noblewoman, and she is all set to press charges for assault and trespassing. She is ready to toss Veron back into whatever gutter he crawled out of. Totally stunned, Julia found it hard to believe that Veron, with his scrappy background, had the guts to sneak into noble territory. She can't believe that a scrawny, lanky guy like him could climb up the walls. Without wasting a second, she takes the responsibility of reporting Veron to the police herself, which calms the noblewoman. On the way, Veron wouldn't shut up about how unfair this was. He is only defending himself, asking if that happens to be a crime worth turning him in for. With a momentary silence, Julia breaks the ice by agreeing that the Frisia family is notorious for their nasty demeanor. She lets him know that Veron's statement might hold some truth. Before Veron flips out again, Julia shuts him up right away. She lets this Dumbo know that he doesn't get free passes to hit people. With determined eyes, Julia makes a big offer for Veron to follow her. She intends to teach him how to control himself. But this nutjob only cares if food and drinks are included in this offer. And just like that, he met his liege, Julia, who took him in as her own. Soon, he joined the Night Order, but his crappy personality was never his strong suit for making friends. Thanks to his nasty attitude, people kept a distance, which left only Julia, the one person who actually gave a damn about him. As long as he was by her side, everything felt right. Julia stood firm, always helping others and never turning away from injustice. Over time, Veron's respect for her grew, turning into something more than just an apprenticeship. He soon fell for her, but he knew he could never act on it, leaving those emotions nothing but a burden for her. His feelings, no matter how strong, would only hold her back. Although Veron claims his emotion is nothing but a burden to Julia, which is why he is dead set on killing Deculane, he is pretty sure that Deculane would be the end of his liege. This man would become the sole reason for Julia's demise, and to him, it's all pretty clear. Every disaster in this twisted game is a ripple effect of Deculane's actions, and this guy knows that Veron's prediction isn't wrong at all. But Deculane, unfazed, tells Veron that he is wrong and that he will change the outcome of Deculane's fate. He will make sure this guy won't walk down the path of destruction. That said, he swears of never harming Julia and offers Veron a hand. Yet Veron's goals are unbothered by Deculane's newfound understanding. Eyes blazing with mana, he refuses to change his mind and still wishes to kill this professor. With a heavy sigh, Deculane knows that his stubborn choice will haunt Julia for eternity. Now there is only one thing left to do, so he kicks Veron off the train. In the meantime, Julia's subordinates catch her in deep thought, probably worrying for Veron. She brushes it off, knowing Veron is capable enough to take care of himself. Falling through the endless sky, Veron lets his tears fall freely. He can only hope his liege a happy life. Swift flies like a free bird, letting her maker see the full crash site. Having a full view, Sylvia finally gets the hang of this situation. She realizes that Deculane killed his own guard, and the guard went down the cliff and into oblivion. Keeping a full focus, she gets a full understanding of how this situation proceeds to such a grave ending. Learning the night Veron had motives of killing Professor Deculane first, but failed miserably, she learns that in his act of self-defense, Professor Deculane had no option but to eliminate him by kicking the knight off the train. Soon enough, Sirio calls Sylvia's attention back to Earth, alarming that the assembly is about to start. Giving off a concerned look, she leaves it be, but her mind wouldn't quit thinking about Deculane. She holds on to the hope that Deculane will appear in time, avoiding any further trouble. Moving on, the minions are excited to catch the sight of their vice chief, Lilia Fremian, of the Security Bureau. Thus, Lilia, out on patrol, verifies the site of the explosion and attack. Guards come clean that it's the right place, but with the Brecht assembly happening soon, that's just to be expected, like it's no biggie. Adjusting to the norm, Lilia questions if there are any casualties. Giving out a flat yes. These guys confirm the status of 2 people still missing, if not injured. Taken aback, she hears them out, naming Knight Veron and Professor Deculian. That takes her by surprise. Moreover, they guide Lilia to their supervisor for further details on this matter. Right then, Lilia's eyes fall on the body of a little kid, probably passed out. She confirms this little dude is still out of it, thanks to the shock of this accidental crash. Chief Lilia continues her investigation, taking down everyone's reports. The lot informs Lilia of a knight rescuing them and evacuating them safely out of the crash site. Not to mention, they still recall the time of the train's mid-air ride. But by the time he woke up, it had already crashed off the cliff. Considering a second opinion, this victim claims that Assassin's second attack might have escalated things. The theory of mid-air didn't quite make sense. Good thing this guy took a picture out of shock, so they have evidence now. Lilia is wondering if he just magically picked up the train. Out of nowhere, this mystery voice echoes in her mind, claiming that Knight Veron is dead. Not just that, it also admits that Veron pulled this whole thing off and did his best to eliminate Deculane, but failed miserably. Keeping it short, Head Professor Deculane survived. Chief Lilia is totally caught off guard by this creepy telepathic message lending support for her investigation of the crime scene. This telepathic report might come in handy, but that surely freaked out Lilia. Having a look around, she doesn't see anyone who looks remotely suspicious to have pulled this off. This stunt leaves her with more questions than answers now. All of a sudden, some dude informs Lilia of someone walking right from the crash site. She notices a super chill dude with a noble posture coming into sight, and she quickly figures that it's none other than Professor Deculane himself. Totally worn out and bruised, Deculane, in deep thought, hasn't noticed the crowd and Lilia yet. He is aware that the strange happening hadn't happened at the exact moment. He would have been dead meat. Just like that, he would have been known for being taken out by some nameless knight of all people. Not to mention, he would have lost the opportunity to figure out what or who saved him back then. Like Veron, he would have ended up at the bottom of that cliff, forgotten and powerless. The realization hits hard that he stood no chance against Veron. He felt utterly powerless against his own guard. But the real question lingers in his mind. Who in the world saved him back then? Without skipping a beat, Lilia calls for Head Professor Deculane's attention, verifying his safety. With a quick intro, she claims to be the Lilia Fremian from the Security Bureau. Thus, she lets him know that he has to fill out the report to help the investigation process. Ignoring her blabber, Deculane asks for what time it is, and she mentions 3:30. While he is in a much deeper thought to figure out, he is spared 6 hours to make it back in time. Out to do her duty, Lilia gets down to discuss what has happened so far, but this professor is not even the least bit interested. Instead, he tends to ask her if this is the only way to Brecht. That ticks her off, but she answers to Deculane that there is a road and sea route to Brecht. Then she gets down to questioning him about a few things. But Deculane vanishes in a blink. When asked, no one, not even the workers, had a clue where the professor disappeared. Lilia figures out that Deculane has pulled off a speed spell to slip away her grasp. After everything, blocking the train, telekinesis, fighting assassins, and taking on Veron, this dude still packs enough mojo. She can't believe this man had enough juice left to cast Accelerate Magic. That's a high-class spell. That pisses her off, confirming that Lockhart was right about this guy. Meanwhile, at the Brecht Assemble, the hall is packed, and it's 9:30. Sylvia still waits for Deculane's return. The host, all formal and out of sight, thanks the attendees for answering their summons. Then, out of nowhere, a monstrous surge of mana totally creeps out Sylvia, who is quick to notice that is none other than Dezekton, the great leader of Brecht, a living legend who had abandoned the outside world on his own terms. Looking at him, she knew to challenge the Archmage title, she had to reach his level. Now the roll call starts, marking the attendance of Giltheon of the Illid family, Ethansik of the Bran family, Barun of the Veorad, and Helm of the Rewind. Just when Eucline of the Deculane family's name is called out, silence flows to the table, with zero response. The host decides to call their names 3 times, and if no response, then this family will face elimination from the 12 sorcerers. This escalates the gossip like wildfire, how the head of the Deculane family's downfall started with Eucline's coming. Their first summoning was marked to be 200 years ago, and it would be a big tragedy for their demise. Sylvia hears it all, how they trash talk about the current head of the Deculane family, being a serious letdown compared to his ancestors. Laughter echoes through the hall for the talentless prick, as the host calls Deculane's name 3 times. Right about now, the host is about to move on. The doors burst open with a force that silenced the room. Standing there, Eucline of the Deculane family marks his attendance, catching everyone off guard.